Welcome to Veterans Archives, where we are dedicated to preserving the stories of our nation's heroes. We hope you enjoy this story. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, like and share our videos. Check us out across all social media. Be sure to like and share those pages as well. And for more information, go to www.veteransarchives.org. Today is Thursday, March 20th, 2025. We're talking with Andrew Pavlica, who served the United States Army. So good evening, Andrew.
Good evening, sir.
It's good to see you here. I'm glad you made it.
Yes, excellent.
All right.
Glad it cleared up.
Well, we're going to start no kidding. I almost called you this afternoon like, "Are you sure you want to come here?" Because it's snowing and all kinds of stuff.
It was snowing and freezing, and then when I got on the highway, it was bright sunny. So,
welcome to Michigan.
Yep.
All 4 seasons, one day.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll start out kind of easy. When and where were you born?
I was born in Concord, New Hampshire in 1985. Shortly after, my family moved to Naperville, Illinois, a suburb outside of Chicago, about 40 minutes. And then I want to say in 1999, right before I started high school, my family moved to Howell, Michigan. Started high school there and enlisted after that.
Okay. What was it like growing up? Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, all my siblings are dramatically older than me. No offense to anybody, but my youngest older sibling is 10 years older than me. So we kind of grew up in the same household, so to speak, but they moved out pretty quickly well before we moved to Michigan.
Okay. So for all intents and purposes, you were kind of like an only child.
For a little bit, yeah. I was definitely spoiled.
Yeah. Okay. It's funny you say Naperville, and here's why. Because I was stationed at Great Lakes when I was in the Navy, so I'm familiar with that area. We used to go to kind of some of the smaller towns on weekends because it was quiet. But I served in the Navy with a guy from Naperville, and I swear on a weekly basis, I meet people from Naperville. I don't know if it's like a breeding ground or what it is.
Hopefully a breeding ground for success.
Yes. In fact, the people I know from Naperville are all very, very successful. So you're in good company. So what prompted the moves? Was that like your dad's work, your mom's work?
So my mom worked in a pharmacy. So after we moved to Michigan, she just took care of the house. My dad was a 3M abrasive specialist. So naturally with the big 3 automotive industry, it was easier for us to move out to Michigan instead of him traveling mostly during the week to do calls on plants and stuff like that. So
okay.
Just kind of made sense, I think.
All right, I got it. Well, speaking of mom and dad, tell us a little bit about growing up and what are some of your memories of your mom?
Oh, gosh. I want to say a lot of them were Christmas morning type stuff where, you had your mom in the 80s and 90s, since it was so common to smoke cigarettes in your home. She had that short kind of hair, the puffy hair, and she would just sit back and watch me open gifts with the dogs running around. I remember her taking me to football practice and helping me carry my gear to and from the car. What else? I remember her telling me to not cross certain streets when I was super little, like 75th Street. I wasn't allowed to go across that in Naperville. I did often, but I wasn't allowed to. It was like a 4-lane kind of Grand River speed from what I remember. And I remember her picking me up from skateboarding and rollerblading back in the day. And that's the bulk of it, I think, is stuff like that.
Yeah, typical mom stuff.
Yeah, great mom stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, tell me a little bit about Dad. What do you remember about him?
So he was a recovering alcoholic. I was too young at the time when I don't even know if I was born when he went sober. Of course, that's something you struggle with your entire life. I never had any weird abuse or, I'd see mom and dad get into fights and stuff like that. But most of the time he was traveling. And the reason I told you about the alcoholism thing is he would take me to his AA meetings on Sunday mornings because they had like the best display of donuts.
Oh.
And so that's where I got my love for pink donuts and sprinkles, aside from The Simpsons, was that. So he used to take me to those, and then he would also come to the football games, baseball games. He used to help me pitch because I used to love pitching. I don't remember if I was good at it. I think I could only throw like 2 cool pitches, and that was a fastball and a knuckleball. And he used to give me signs from the bleachers, like number 1 or number 2, what to throw. and I would try to do something like that. But I remember a lot of that stuff. And then in high school, he was obviously home a lot more because he'd go to work for 3M stuff and come home or be on calls all day, stuff like that. Yeah, and that was really the bulk of it, is kind of similar activities, just gone working a lot more back and forth.
Yeah. So you think your older siblings probably saw him when he was drinking, but by the time you came around, he'd gotten sober.
Yeah, and from what I understand, obviously I wasn't there, is that there was a little bit of, I guess, verbal abuse, which I can see now in his older age, and seeing him progress into like Alzheimer's and dementia, I can kind of see it, how that would happen. But that's the bulk of the memories, is just him going to game practices. He used to take me skateboarding too and drop me off at the skate park in Howell. Or I'm sorry, when we lived in Howell, drop me off at the skate parks around the city or Novi and stuff like that.
Yeah. I wish I'd have known about your affinity with Pink Donuts, because we're right down the street from a place called Groovy Donuts.
Oh, gosh.
And they are like the best donuts I've ever eaten, hands down. So, yeah, next time we get together, I'll make sure I have some Groovy Donuts for you.
Okay. Have you been to Colorado Springs before?
I have not.
If you get the chance to travel there, there's obviously lots to do, but please go to Amy's Donuts.
Okay.
There's 2 shops, I think, currently, and they have this thing called the Elvis. It's a regular donut with a hole in the middle, Nutella, salty potato chips crushed up, and then a little bit of bacon, and it is obnoxiously tasty.
I feel like I could just gain 5 pounds talking about a donut.
Yeah, I feel it in my thighs right now.
I'm gonna have to go run around the block when we're done.
I'm not doing any cardio.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. When I got out of the Army, I decided unless someone's chasing me, I'm not doing cardio. So
yep,
exactly. I'm not going to run anywhere. So it sounds like a really nice kind of regular childhood growing up. Mm-hmm. Other than moving around a little bit, but it sounds like it didn't really hurt you too much. So talk a little bit about school. How was school for you?
Oh, gosh. I can remember a lot from middle school, junior high. I don't remember teachers. I just remember experiences, because that's when I started breaking rules, kind of like crossing 75th Street, skateboarding on curbs that we'd get yelled at about, the typical stuff. My first girlfriend was there, and then, of course, we moved away. So, that's kind of how the stories go.
Yeah.
But, and then when I got to high school, obviously I didn't have any friends in Howell. The first visitation, I guess, the Howell High School, where they show you the locker rooms, where everything's at. My mom came with me because I couldn't drive yet. I was 13 or 14. And I wore this weirdest, like, bowling shirt, right? It was all black and had huge collar, like a zoot suit.
Yeah.
And it was short sleeve. And it had a white stripe going down the middle with pearl buttons. I had my hair like bleach tipped and like gelled up. So I was thinking I was looking fly, but like nowadays I'm like, oh, that's weird looking. But my mom and I were going to my locker room checking out my classes and stuff. And a group of girls approached me and started talking to me. And I apparently got nervous, and my mom started backing away so I could talk to new friends, meet girls or whatever.
Right.
And I guess I started backing up towards her. So that's like my first memory of Howell, aside from when we got there, the builders and realtor were like, it doesn't snow much here. And we got the biggest snowfall aside from this year that Howell's had in like 30 or 40 years. And high school was fine. I mean, I did a lot of skateboarding then. I stopped playing football. I just stuck with skateboarding and mountain biking because that was kind of my passion. I was awful at skateboarding, so I was naturally the film and photography guy.
Yeah.
Anything from like 35 millimeter film, where I'm developing it under a black light in a lab with all the smelly good chemicals, or walking around with a fisheye Canon camera and lens, like getting this close to a skateboard, like within a few inches, trying to make everything look huge and big. Traveled a lot. Weekends we would spend going out to Detroit or Chicago to film skateboarding or to get cool shots or just hang out. And then during the week, occasionally, I think I skipped school 6 or 7 times at most to go to the skate parks when they're empty.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing. Oh, let's see.
Well, did you have like a core group of people that you skateboarded with then? Was it like a
Yeah.
like a skateboard gang or something?
Yeah, it was like a group. Definitely wasn't a gang unless like actually had part of the tattoo. One of my buddies that was in the group, he was a year ahead of us. His name was Kyle Monson. He died in high school when he was supposed to be graduating. And he used to draw, tattoo ideas. And some of us got those tattoos in memory of him because he was a cool dude. He wasn't very good at skateboarding, but everybody was friends with him. And, we wanted to remember him. And I ended up with the worst tattoo.
Really?
Like, I've got some really bad tattoos, but our group was called the Hessians. And I'm not a neo-Nazi or anything crazy. I was dumb when I got this, but he did 2 S's that were similar to lightning bolts.
Right.
And that's a typical sign with German fascists and stuff like that, which I am not. I regret this, but that's his name right there, so I'll probably eventually get that covered up.
They did a nice job on his name, though. I mean, that looks really nice.
Well, they took the exact paper and made a stencil out of it. That's why it kind of looks like pen scratch.
Yeah.
So, but I think that was really the majority of my time was spent going to skateboarding. Then when I got older, I went to house parties, keggers and all that stuff. And I'm still lightweight, so like 2 or 3 beers, and I would not be good to do anything.
Yeah.
So it's still pretty similar to this day.
Yeah, I was known as One Beer Bill.
Really?
Yes, One Beer Bill, because that's all I could drink. It was terrible.
But I don't know. We had some cool safe parties, and if there was an adult there, they usually took everybody's keys.
Yeah.
And so, like, if kids are going to go do nasty stuff, that's potentially really dangerous, I think that was the best option, was to allow that to happen in somewhat of a controlled environment. But if I saw my kids doing that, nope, not allowed. Grounded forever.
Right. Well, I think our kids have to benefit from our mistakes, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, not that I count some of that stuff as mistakes, but some of that stuff could have really gone sideways when I was a kid, and I didn't want them to have to go through that. So
I understand that.
Pretty tough on them. So you make it through high school. Did you go right into the service after graduation, or did you hang out for a while? How did that all evolve?
I was actually in the delayed entry program, DEP.
Okay.
And so I signed, I think, almost all of my documentation the winter that I was supposed to graduate in the spring. And then I went to OSUT in September. So I had the summer to screw around, make decisions, party, hang out with friends, do cool stuff. And then just like that, I was off.
Yeah. Why the Army?
Oh, I didn't inherently enjoy talking to the Marines. Pretty good with first impressions. And the Marines that I've met at the time, I've met a lot of great Marines, but the Marines at the recruiting office, the ones that I used to run and do cardio with and work out with, were very egotistical. And I kind of enjoyed working with the Army guys more. They seemed more down to earth instead of rigid, which is a vast difference because there's a bunch of kick-ass Marines out there, and there's some good kick-ass Army folk, but the Marines are very rigid. And I was like, I kind of want to just do tanker stuff.
Yeah.
And so I enlisted to become a tanker, even though they have tankers. I was like, I don't want to be rigid. I want to be able to grow a cool mustache in the field and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. It makes sense. And, I've found that I used to recruit. Don't tell anyone I was a recruiter for 4 years. But people who joined the Marine Corps were going to join the Marine Corps. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just what they were going to do. They weren't going to talk. They weren't going to shop services. They knew that that's what they wanted. Same on the flip side is people who don't want to be Marines know that they don't want to be Marines.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you signed up, you made it through delayed entry, and then you head out to basic training. Yep. Talk to us a little bit about, like, what was that initial impression when you stepped off the bus into basic training?
Oh, the shark attack or the processing bus?
Well, here's the funny thing that I've found. Like, okay, so I went to boot camp back in the 80s. I graduated in 83, and I was in boot camp in the 80s, and it was different. First of all, I was in the Navy to start, and I ended up in the Army. Long story. But like, from the minute you got there, they were on you, like, the whole time. And what I keep hearing from people who are, a little bit younger, from a different generation, is like, when you first got there, it was pretty chill, and then all of a sudden, like, the switch flipped when you started actual training. I'm just wondering, what was your experience?
So I got held up at processing with the group for, I think, a week.
Mm-hmm.
And they had, I think, more of the retiring drill sergeants there. And we got into learning about marching, PT, that kind of stuff. And then that was about, I really want to say it was a week, but I feel like it was slightly less, like 6 days or something. And then we went to our actual basic training unit with our long-term drill instructors.
Yeah.
And that was vastly different. I will say off the bat, though, everybody was looking at it like it was detrimental to their health. They were scared. I was having a blast. I wasn't like being a smarty pants or a smart ass to the drill sergeants. I wasn't being rude, nasty, condescending to anybody. I was having fun. Nobody likes having fun getting smoked all day, but everything else I enjoyed.
Right.
You know, getting screamed at, getting yelled at. Like, I didn't laugh. I took it very seriously, but I was like, this is all training, and it's all going to matter at some point.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I had just had this maturity level about it, but for a lot of people, it was rough. We had a gentleman try to hang himself with a vacuum cord outside the window of his barracks. We were on the 3rd floor, and the vacuum hit the ground. So,
I mean, it's not funny, but it's funny.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, there's so many better ways to just leave. Aside from that, some of my friends I went to basic with, I actually deployed with. So that was pretty cool. And a lot of them became long-term friends. Like, I still talk to them. There's a few that I see every so often. Mm-hmm. But it was a good experience. I had the most wicked drill sergeant.
Really?
He was intimidating. But again, I took it seriously. But he was just very intimidating in the fact that he was an old school Mexican gangster. And he was like, I'm not racist or anything. He was the biggest Mexican dude you've ever seen in your life. Uh-huh. Sleeves rolled up. His arms were like bigger than my thighs. Tattoos from the fingernails all the way up. And he just had big cheeks. He always had a big lip and a grizz. Mm-hmm. And he carried around one of those gas station pickles in a bag. I never saw him bite it, but he would always have one.
What was that all about?
I think that was just like his thing. Maybe he enjoyed it as a morning snack and we just never saw him eat it. You know? I don't recall exactly. But he used to talk real deliberately and slow. And I'll give you an example. I tell my wife and stepson this story all the time because I think it's hilarious. But, you know, at the end of basic, when you're turning in all your gear, you're taking the tape off your helmet and your Kevlar, and you have to clean the adhesive off of it. I had turned mine in, and I'm sitting in the hallway, and the drill sergeant's checking everybody's gear in his office. And he's talking to like a platoon leader or something. I forgot what it's called, but the young basic trainee that's kind of leading the group. Mm-hmm. He's like, whose helmet is this? And, you know, somebody's like, Private Pavlica, drill sergeant. And so I'm listening at this point because I heard my name.
Right.
And keep in mind, I'm like, I want to say about 30 feet from his office in like a dorm room. So everything's quiet for me to hear it. And he's like, Private Pavlica, he's going to come to my office later so I could destroy him. And, you know, this huge built muscular dude with a little mustache and a big grizz, I just instantly like put my face in my hands. I was like, oh. I ended up not getting destroyed.
Clearly.
But
he could have done it if he wanted to.
Oh yeah, it could have wrecked my night.
Yeah.
But basic training, man, I had so much fun, to be honest. And the rappelling wall, gosh, the ruck marches sucked. But, you know, as tankers, we need to learn to, I guess, walk once in a while.
Right.
But, yeah, the mount site training I really took to heart. Not because I watched a lot of Navy SEAL movies or anything crazy like that, but I really enjoyed like CQB stuff, which comes to play later on. Mm-hmm. But that was my most enjoyable part, was the mount site training with the paintball guns. They didn't have simunition at the time. And the rappelling tower was a blast. Actually, I think I said FU to a drill sergeant on the rappelling tower. I was getting up there, and I was roped in. I was getting into my, like, L position, kind of. Mm-hmm. And I started to say to myself, I was like, I can't do this. And then this little drill sergeant, he was, like, barely 5'4", but he could scream.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts to go push me. He's like, "You could do a private. You could do." I was like, "Don't you touch me." And then I roped down. But I'm sweating to this day because I feel like I should not have gotten away with that. I probably should have been shoved off.
It sounds like you absorbed this whole, like, the whole thing. Like, you just took it all in. And I love the attitude that this may seem ridiculous now, but it's going to mean something later on.
Yeah, and it does.
Yeah, it really does. And that's what some people don't get. And that's why you got people who try and hang themselves with a vacuum cleaner because they take it personally, or they don't understand the whole basic premise behind what you're doing.
Yep. And one more thing about basic, we had a drill sergeant that was on the verge of retiring, and he wore his Freemason rings, and he must have been a pastor singer because he could call cadence that would give you goosebumps. It was like going to church. It was ridiculously good. And I could still, like, hear him to this day. I can't remember his name, but, like, his ability to call cadence and sing was incredibly good. It was nice to listen to, especially in days of chaos like that.
It can, if someone's doing it right, it can be like art or like music.
Definitely agree. You could have put a piano to it. It was so good.
Yeah. Sometimes when I'm out walking, because again I don't run, but when I'm out walking, I'll throw on cadence because you can get it on Apple Music or wherever you want to get it. They have cadence, and it reminds me of all that. I think that's one thing I do miss from basic training was that piece of it. Because you're marching, no one's messing with you, and you're hearing this, or you're running, and no one's messing with you, and you're
everybody's singing it with you.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah.
So you have that weird audio like camaraderie going on.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you're 7 miles in, you didn't even know it.
Yeah, I wish.
Maybe you did know it.
I'm sure my self was cramping up somewhere.
Yeah. So you make it through basic. Where did you go to basic?
Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Okay, and then your AIT, where was that?
Well, we didn't have AIT. It was all one station unit training.
Oh.
So it was basic combined with AIT.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how long they were running like OSUT groups, but it was, I think my first day was September 10th, and my last day was towards the end of January, and then they put me on an extra 2 weeks of training for the M1A2 tanks and the M1A2 SEPs that were coming out or being utilized more often. So I got to stick around for that, but it wasn't like basic. It was like an extra 2 weeks where you would kind of go to college class and get hands-on training with the new tanks and stuff like that. It wasn't like we were getting marched and smoked everywhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we had babysitters, but...
Yeah. Well, sometimes AIT can be like an extension of basic training. That's kind of why I asked that. So you make it through all of that, and then you go to your first duty station after?
Yep. So I went to 3rd ACR, 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment when it was still at Fort Carson, Colorado. Amazing base. Again, that's where I started establishing a relationship with Colorado Springs, mountain biking, and donuts more so. But and then I deployed really quickly after that. I deployed in February of 2005 now. And I got to the unit right when they were starting their tank gunnery qualifications. And so for tankers, and I think Cav Scouts as well, when they qualify with the Bradley, they have to go through specific gunnery qualifications, and those are called tables, table 5, 6, 7, 8. Now there's something way different. But I got to the gunnery, and I'd been in a main gun or I hadn't been in one, but I'd been in the turret when it was firing. I was able to load rounds and do different tasks and basic training, but this was really important to the tanker crew as a qualification to get a Q1, qualify first try. And we did not qualify first time because of me.
Oh.
So brand new guy in a tanker unit. My buddy Durker, who I'll talk about later, was a driver at the time. I forgot who my gunner was, but I was the loader. And Staff Sergeant Kryling was the tank commander. They all did really well. I did not. So as a tank loader, you have a machine gun up on the outside of the turret, M240 Bravo or Charlie, whatever they're calling it. And then down in the turret, you have a little knee switch and an ammo door. Your only job is to listen to the call for the ammo, case it's Sabo versus heat versus something else for different types of targets, and hit the knee switch with your knee. You literally stand there and you tap it. It's hydraulic. The door whips open, and you hit a button. You take the round. You flip it over and you shove it in there, closed fist, so your fingers don't get caught anywhere. Mm-hmm. And then you arm the gun and you kind of lean back and sit back away from the breech because that's going to come right by you. And I was in full panic mode, like I want to say like a fifth grader. I was so nervous that after they fired one of the main rounds, they said load heat. Mm-hmm. And so we just fired a Sabo. And so I hit the ammo door, and that's it. And then I froze, and I'm looking at Staff Sergeant Kryling, who's probably a foot away from me and just looking at me with rage, like, why are you not loading? And I'm like, there's already a round in there, Sergeant. And, of course, there's not. It's not an auto-loaded cannon like some of the Russian tanks or anything like that. And anyway, that delayed Q1 because we failed that engagement because of me. So aside from getting smacked really hard a few times in the head, we ended up Q2ing the next round because I did not make that mistake again.
Right.
Any tanker will tell you that when they're qualifying, the only goal aside from safety is to Q1 everything, and they want the highest score possible. They want to look good. They want to hold a plaque or an AF cap, which is the bottom of the main gun round. That's when it's fired. It's kind of like brass for a firearm.
Yeah.
Is to get their plaque or whatever the award is and just take a picture with it. Like, that's all they're focused on. They don't care about what's going on at home. They don't care that they're deploying in 30 days or 60 days or a couple months. They want that Q1.
Right.
And I screwed it up so badly. But I can remember getting smacked. I've never been smacked so hard in my life by a man, especially when I couldn't smack him back. But I didn't make that mistake again. I think we Q2'd, so if somebody hears this and says something different, I hope it wasn't a Q3.
Either way, it wasn't going to be your fault, right?
I hope I didn't screw anything else up that I can't remember.
Yeah. It sounds like you learned something from that. It's interesting that someone smacked you because that's like so not what they allow to happen today. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's some value sometimes in those things happening because you haven't forgotten it. And quite frankly, in the field, when it's really going down, you can't afford to freeze up like that.
Absolutely not.
Because then people die. That's the importance of the Q1, right?
Absolutely.
There's no Q2 when you're deployed.
Correct, yep.
Yeah. So how long were you guys in doing this train up before deployment?
I want to say qualifications in tank gunnery was only about 2 weeks. Because I believe I deployed sometime in February.
Okay.
Obviously going to Kuwait first, like many units do. Then after about 20 days, moving up north to Iraq.
Now, did you go to Beering?
Yeah. Yeah. It was so cool. The food there was so good.
Yeah. It was so hot at Beering. Now, I don't know if you experienced this. When we were there, it rained. You could hear the rain hitting the Quonset hut that we were in. But when you walked outside, the rain wasn't hitting the ground.
Oh, I did not experience that.
It was evaporating before it hit. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
I remember getting off the C-17 or C-130, I can't remember which, and it just being blasted. It felt like an exhaust of a vehicle just hitting you in the face.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. I don't remember rain at all. I remember the awful hot tents that we were all piled in, but...
Yep, absolutely. And if one more person says, well, at least it was a dry heat, I'm going to punch him in the nose.
Yeah. At least it was a dry heat.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Right. It's like, I tell them, dry heat, like you stuck your head in the oven and then someone turned on a hairdryer. That's how hot it was.
Yep. I used to powder coat in my free time, which is kind of painting metal. You paint something with powder and you bake it so it melts. Yeah. It's usually pretty firm. But anyway... that's what it reminds me of when I was powder coating, is working in and out of an oven, whether it be a big one or a walk-in oven. Mm-hmm. It was exactly like Kuwait.
Yeah. Well, I remember the education ladies, so I don't know if they had it when I was there in 2006, but they had like an education trailer where you could go like sign up for classes and stuff if you wanted to.
Okay.
Anyway, there was a lady that worked there, and she actually baked cookies in her car during the day.
That's a real thing?
That's a real thing. That actually happened when I was there. I saw it. Otherwise, I just would not believe it, but I saw it with my own two eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you're in Kuwait for what, about 2 weeks for acclimation?
I want to say it was 2 or 3 weeks. It's hard to remember exactly.
Yeah, and then you make the jump to Iraq. Where'd you go? Where were you at in Iraq?
First, we were around Baghdad somewhere.
Okay.
And we staged there for a week or two because I think our unit was moving fully up north by the Syrian border, which is where we ended up. Mm-hmm. And at the time, the tanks were on the Hets, which to anybody that's listening is a big truck that can haul that kind of weight. And they load the tank up on the back of it, just like a semi-truck. But you have to crew it. Mm-hmm. And so that was pretty intimidating because those are strapped down pretty well, chains, everything. And we went down Route Irish, which anybody that's been deployed in Iraq knows that Route Irish is the most deadly road in the world. And I'm thankful I did not experience anything bad on there. But knowing that they had to be crewed, so I was sitting up in the hatch with my machine gun, popping in and out of the hatch. And our Kiowa pilots from the CAV, which I think Kiowas are some of the coolest helicopters ever. Yeah. They would kind of fly. I swear I could almost grab part of the Kiowa. But they would fly so close to us for like, I want to say 30 seconds. It felt like it was an hour. It was the coolest thing. And they'd fly off. Mm-hmm. But I think we moved from Baghdad to Tal Afar and then Sinjar, which is northern Iraq. And after about 20 or 30 days of that, we moved to the Syrian border in a town called Rabia.
Okay. And then that's where you were at for the rest of your deployment?
Pretty much. Okay. We had 10th Group Special Forces out there, which we got to work with on some really cool things. I'm not one of those military folks that associates myself with like a proximity of people. Like I'm not like I worked with Special Forces or anything cool like that. Those guys were really cool. But we worked with them up in the Syrian border, obviously mostly worried about the traffic in and out of Syria. And then that was mostly Rabia. And then I went on leave, I want to say right around a 6-month time. It was like perfectly timed in the 13 months I was going to be there. Mm-hmm. And almost the whole unit went to Tal Afar. And there was like major operations going on there. And I came back from leave and I was like completely dumbfounded. I forgot how to drive a tank. I was a driver. I got promoted, quote unquote, to a driver position at the time. Uh-huh. And in a tank, you kind of lay back and you have something similar to motorcycle handlebars. Mm-hmm. And it's a rolling throttle. You know, you have your position selector for drive, neutral, reverse, pivot, steer, all that stuff, like right in the middle of the T-bars is what we call them. And I was hitting barriers like a total jackass. My tank commander, the same one that I already made very upset, was not happy with me when I got back. But a lot of the major operations had been cooling down. A lot of our guys worked with 10th Group and a Navy SEAL group. I forgot which, but I didn't work with them. I met like a few of them. Mm-hmm. But major Tal Afar operations were going on, and shortly after, we moved back up north to Rabia.
Okay. Yeah, interestingly enough, when I got there in 2006, they had pulled all the tanks out. Like
where at?
I was in Fob Merez up in Mosul. So,
okay.
So the whole Nineveh province. But when we got there, like we had Mark 19s. They took them away from us. We couldn't use Mark 19s. There were no tanks allowed in the city. They had really, like, they didn't want us blowing things up anymore. It was very strange. Got it. So we didn't get the benefit. I mean, when we got there, it was the first cav was there, and so we had all of that, but we didn't. There were no tanks. They had long since sent them away.
Gotcha. We were fortunate to be on tanks or Humvees the entire time, thankfully.
Yeah.
We even got to drive the tanks up the Sinjar Mountains, which is incredibly scary. And because those roads are just like mountain roads, if you go to a real mountain town like Virginia, Pennsylvania, and you see those tight winding roads where people say it's only 3 miles, but it takes 45 minutes.
Right.
That's what it was like without the woods. And driving those tanks up there, everything's hot, overheating. You'd have to take breaks so your brakes wouldn't fail. But parking, this is one of the times I wish I had taken more pictures, because you would see the agriculture difference from Kuwait, Baghdad, and then you see the Sinjar Mountains, which you're getting into Kurdish population area. And those folks who are a lot more civilized, they would have agriculture, farming, crops, and it was like green yards in the middle of Rocky Mountain Desert, like that loose shale stuff that's in the hills, and it just looked super cool. I know somebody's got pictures of it somewhere, but it was one of the cooler experiences of being in Iraq, is seeing that. So
when you're, I want to ask this: so when you're driving the tank, how are you seeing? Is that on a monitor? How
you have a periscope.
Okay.
For daytime driving, you have 3 periscopes, a big long one in the front that you're kind of leaning back on, and a little mirror. And then you have 2 side mirrors that are probably 2/3 of the length, maybe half. At night, you still have those 2 basic side mirrors, but you have your night vision periscope, which nowadays, if you're looking at night vision, this looks like something almost from the 1800s, like a long time ago, but it fits up in the periscope. It's a little, kind of like a little screen of night vision, and it's got a big rubber ring around it because tank brakes are really good. So if you step too hard on the brakes, you're going to hit your face against something. At least it's padded. But that's how you typically see as a driver. Obviously, if you're in the turret, the gunner, the loader, or the tank commander, a lot of them have periscopes if they're closed hatch. The gunner is obviously looking out the sights the whole time, but the loader and the tank commander have hatches that come down, and usually periscopes around. I know the first deployment, we spent a lot of time with the hatches open.
Okay.
So we were in the Kurdish area, so a lot of it was so chill. A lot of our missions or presence patrols and stuff like that, we would sit on top of the turrets and just let the driver do their thing. It was almost like the Wild West without the gunfire and explosions.
Yeah, the Kurds had it locked down.
Yeah.
We did a little bit of work with them, and those, when you say they're civilized, like they know how to do it. For sure.
They're a different group of reliable, good people.
They are.
For sure.
Absolutely. We used to go up to Erbil, in the Kurdish areas up there, to get equipment and parts and things like that. Anyway, you would get up there, you'd take your stuff off, and
yep, exactly.
Yeah, it was like being in a city almost.
Yep, it was almost like, obviously you're in a different country, but a different friendly country instead of a war zone.
Right.
And instead of kids coming up to you asking for candy and Pepsi, I got to tell you about the cute little 3-year-old girl that would always ask for that. But they would be offering you like real chai out of the little glasses. Oh, that was so good. And they'd be offering you goat, lamb, anything you can think of, and you're like just enjoying it. Like, they were such good people, and we got to work with the Peshmerga people a little bit. And we were actually there for one of the big first election sequences, I would say, because there was obviously lots of them because of all the corruption going on in the country.
Right.
We were there and watching. We didn't know this was happening right away. Our 10th group guys told us after it already started happening. But the Peshmerga people were actually executing known bad actors. They were trying to infiltrate the government and scare people. They were executing them and booting them off rooftops. And that was like my second experience with like violence. Yeah. Like real violence. Because I was like, oh my gosh.
So it sounds like this first deployment was just kind of chill, even though you're in a war zone. I mean, it's you're doing some kind of cool stuff. Although I'm still trying to wrap my head around driving a tank up a mountain without having like a windshield in a car. You know what I mean? Like that.
It's scary.
Yeah, terrifying.
And the worst, going back to the worst part about it, I think, was the tank commander and the loader had to be out of the hatches because the road's so narrow. They don't want you going off if you're steering off.
Right.
So they're exposed. Granted, thankfully, it was a more friendly-ish area, just north of Sinjar, the city, where V-bids were going off all the time. We would find something similar to the Phantom of the Opera mask of people's faces getting blown up at the gate for V-bids and stuff like that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you go north of that and it's way different. But yeah, it was definitely scary. I think I only did that once. There was a couple platoons or groups of tanks that had to go up there once or twice or just move to go get maintenance done from Rabia to Sinjar instead of going south to Talifar and then over to Sinjar. I think they made that trip once or twice, but I think I only had to drive once for that, and that was enough.
Okay. And this is a 13-month deployment, you said?
Yeah, it was right around 13 months, and I had to go a little bit longer because as a new private, I got put on wash rack detail. So that's, for people listening, that's when all the vehicles are done with their deployments and they have to go back to Kuwait, get cleaned up so that way there's no dirt or anything going through customs, no oil leaking, no gas and stuff like that. So I got stuck at wash rack with I think for 2 or 3 weeks. And thankfully I had some humorous people with me because that was miserable 12, 16 hours of washing vehicles. Your hands would be destroyed even though you have gloves and wet weather gear on. Everything got soaked.
Yeah. Because
customs, you'd have to pull a pack, what we call the engine of the tank. You'd have to get under the engine and clean up all the grease, all the oil and dirt that's been caked in there for almost a year. Oh, that was very miserable time.
Yeah, from my understanding, so when I deployed, we just fell in on equipment. We didn't bring our own Humvees or anything. It was already
lucky.
there. Yeah, but I've heard those stories. Not even a freaking grain of sand could be in that vehicle anywhere.
Customs would go through with gloves. Yeah, almost white glove detail.
Yeah.
So,
and anybody that's been in that area of the world, it's not like sand at Lake Michigan either. It's like talcum powder, so it gets in everything,
and it grips.
Yeah,
it does not come off easy.
No.
Lots of chiseling.
Yeah, I've destroyed, I can't tell you how many hard drives on computers and things like that because of that stupid sand. So, yeah, not an easy task.
Oh, awful.
Yeah. Is there anything else about that deployment you wanted to talk about?
Well, aside from what I mentioned, I think being on wash rack with one of the Cav Scout buddies, I think he had just gotten promoted or was just about to be promoted. His name was Reggie, Sergeant Regalado. He's one of my buddies that passed away. But he was another cool Spanish dude that was hilarious. He was kind of in charge of us, and we had this super redneck, from, I don't want to say the mud of Alabama, but something close to that. Mm-hmm. And, we busted him lying a couple times on the deployment. He'd be on the phone with his family and he'd be like, well, it's not about when the rounds come zipping over you, it's when you get hit. You have not been shot at all. He's one of those guys.
Yeah.
And Regalado with his southern accent would be imitating him. And so the Spanish guy with the accent making fun of the redneck with a hardcore accent in English. And I remember we were sitting at breakfast chow, and the redneck guy, I forgot what his name was, but he's like, man, I love corn dogs. I love Mountain Dew, too. And we're like, yeah, that's pretty good stuff usually, And Reggie was just like, oh, yeah, I love corn dogs. I love Mountain Dew. And would just imitate him with all the accent possibilities. It was just one of the funnier things, but I'll tell you later about that. But he ended up passing away from gunfire.
Okay.
But he was just he was probably what held me together the last 2-3 weeks in wash rack with his humor. He was just he was so damn funny all the time. And he had this sense of looking out for you.
Mm-hmm. I feel like sometimes we're put together with people like that to help get us through those hard times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a couple minutes or a couple months.
Yeah. Everything happens for a reason, right?
Absolutely.
So you were going to tell me, though, about this 3-year-old girl. Was that the next deployment or was that this deployment?
That was the first deployment.
Okay.
So while we were at Rabia, I could send you the link to Google Earth one day and you could check it out. But we had this 13-floor granary right on the border, and there was train tracks there, so obviously they were shipping granary or some kind of agricultural thing at some point. And like I said, so it was, I want to say it was on 6 acres of barricaded fence and the 13-floor granary, which didn't take up much more than a half acre of actual square land, I guess. And the 10th group guys lived there. And the only thing we had at the gates were the tanks at the time. There wasn't an actual gate. Mm-hmm. So when somebody's coming in and out, we'd have to start the tank, which takes 2 minutes about to actually start the tank and back it up and then put it back. And so we'd kind of sit up there on guard, being ready to move the tanks, knowing on the radio if people were coming in and out. And we had this cute little Iraqi girl who had she must have had the best experience because she would come right up to us and she wasn't scared of anything. And she was just adorable. And I hate to say this, but she had a lazy eye, and that made her even more cute.
Yeah.
Because it was way gone. And she'd come up to us at the gate and she'd throw her arms up to hug us. But we'd be up in the tank and she'd be like, Pepsi, Pepsi, chocolate. And we knew of course we'd give her that stuff and she'd bring it home to her family or go around the corner and eat it. We don't know.
Right.
But she was just I don't know, adorable and not scared. And her older brothers, who were just a couple years older than her, wouldn't come around to the gate. So at some point, I knew the parents knew, but she kept coming all year. So I assumed that they were okay with it.
Yeah.
Because, little brother would rat out a little girl talking to foreign military any day. But she was just super cute, super nice. And of course, we gave her that Pepsi and chocolate that she deserved all the time. So again, that was more around the Kurdish population too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What a great experience.
She was so cool. I can't say I would have been as brave at all.
No.
So.
No, not that age, not with all that. But you know what? I think it's interesting what you get used to, right? Even that year of deployment, you get used to things that when you come home, you're like, oh, that isn't normal.
Yeah.
Right? But those kids probably grew up with all of this stuff happening.
They grew up in some kind of violence, either tribal or military at some point.
Absolutely.
But
so you finish your sentence at the wash rack.
Yep.
I'm assuming at some point you get stateside again.
Yep. So I fly back to Fort Carson, Colorado. I didn't have an exact date of when I'd be back, so my family wasn't there or anything. But my buddy Dirker, who was the driver and then the gunner that I decided to bring up, he's the only one to see me off the plane. And he, is obviously one of my best friends now. And all I have is a uniform because all our stuff is in storage.
Right.
And I'm like, can you take me to the mall so I can get some clothes? And of course, I just get home from deployment. I have this money. I'm going to buy some cool stuff. And I remember going to the mall, and the perfume and the cologne from those stands made my eyes water. And Dirker was like, are you crying, dude? And I'm like, no, man, it's hurting my eyes. I was like, I'm just going to get a couple of shirts and pants and leave. And then he dropped me off the barracks, and he got me a case of beer because I was too young. He got me a 6-pack. I think I was 20 at the time. And I sat in my barracks room. I made some phone calls. I had went and got a phone as well. And then I just hung out until I bought a car a few days later, my first ever dream car. And then, went home on leave, drove that 96 Nissan 240SX all the way from Colorado Springs to Michigan to see my family. On the way back, saw a tornado, I think in Nebraska. That was scary.
I'll bet.
But, I got home and, did the normal thing, which was, cookouts, making new friends, having parties. There was lots of streaking. There was lots of that going on.
Really?
And, yeah, a lot of service members, I think, especially those that are deployed together.
Yeah.
That just becomes a sign of, or a thing of humor.
Right.
It's never been anything weird and sexual. It's it's just funny. You're partying one day and then you see your buddy riding a bicycle naked down the street at 2 a.m. having a beer, and then he falls over, gets road rash. That's just humorous to so many people. And my wife has a hard time sometimes with my sense of humor.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's funny. My son served as well. He was in the infantry, and when he comes up, so I deployed and came back, and then not too long after that, he actually deployed at the same time that my wife deployed. Not my current wife, but my ex-wife. They both deployed to Iraq. But when we get together, there are things that we think are funny.
Mm-hmm.
And they're funny. I don't care who you are, but everyone looks at you a little sideways like there is something wrong with you because you change.
Yeah.
Deployment will change you and change how you look at things and change what you laugh at. I remember when I first came home laughing at something that was clearly not funny, but it was funny to me. And people just looked at me like I was crazy. So, yeah, I mean, I get it. Riding a bike naked, that's funny.
That's happened so many times. I don't do that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Because obviously that involves jail time. At some point, you're going to get caught doing something stupid.
Right.
So I stopped while I was ahead. But, yeah.
Were you married during this? So you didn't get married till like after your
long after my first appointment. Actually, I don't know if this is TMI, but I actually lost my virginity after my first appointment. People are like, how could you go to war without doing that? I was like, I've never made that a priority. Like, even in high school, I was skateboarding. I made out with some high school chicks, but like, I was skateboarding, doing cool stuff. That's how my mentality has always been. Like, even to this day, like, I know guys that would go and pick up girls all the time. To this day, I think I've only been with 6 or 7 girls my entire life.
Yeah.
So I've never been that kind of person to go out to the club and try to slay bodies and bring girls home or party too much. Like, I want to wake up the next morning, go ride mountain bikes or go slide my car around the drift track, or I don't know, just not get in trouble.
Right. Just different priorities. That's all.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, when you go back to when you got back, your friend had to buy you beer because you couldn't buy beer.
Yeah.
So here you are. You're 20 years old, a virgin. You've served your
Sounds so bad now.
Doesn't it though? You've served your country. You come home and you can't even buy a beer.
Yeah. Well, I think
that's nuts.
Sometimes I think young men and women that do stuff like that should totally be able to buy a beer. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think we're better off not being able to.
Right. There's that balance, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not up to me. Like, we're not a country that was raised like places in Europe where wine and liquor or anything is common at a dinner table. Like, that's kind of looked at as a problem because we haven't grown up in that.
Right.
So, but I definitely know some young guns that would, if they could drink back then, they would have ended up like wrapping their car around a tree or doing something awful and stupid.
Yeah.
So just not me, because 3 beers and, like I said, I'm laying down going to sleep.
Yeah, your party's over.
Yeah.
No naked bike riding for you.
Well, later.
Yeah. Okay. So you go home, and then it's time to pack up and go back to Fort Carson, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you pack up and go back, and so what's happening between now and that next deployment?
I think we had leave, obviously,
right,
when you got home. And then I want to say the first month or 2 months, like, work was a joke, mainly because we didn't have our tank equipment back yet.
Yeah.
So we couldn't go sweep tank motor pool messes or anything like that. It was even PT in the morning. Guys would be showing up with those energy drinks that actually have alcohol in them.
Uh-huh.
And they'd get us for accountability, and then they'd dismiss us, you know. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, we get paid for this. This is amazing. And I was making like pennies being a private.
Right.
But
it was the most money you'd made, right? Up to that point.
Yeah, I was a Bob Evans cook in high school. So like way different. But I want to say after a few months, we started doing tanker stuff again, going to training. And then everybody started receiving their orders. And like I said before, a lot of the guys I went to basic with, I deployed with. And, 3 or 4 of those guys were actually like in my troop. And even more of them were in the regiment. So if I didn't see them in Rabia, I would see them at Talifar or Sinjar or something like that. And then next I know, we're all just packing stuff up, and I blew up my Nissan 240SX, drifting it, and left it there, unfortunately, which I regret to this day.
Oh.
Yep. I took a bus, 19 hours, I think, on a bus to go to Fort Stewart, Georgia, the 3rd ID. That's where I got orders from.
Georgia.
Awful.
It's just hot there.
It's hot. It's sticky. When you get out of the shower in the winter, you're sweating again already. It's not a fun time.
Yeah. And did you deploy out of there then?
Yeah. So I was with Cyclone 464 Armor, 3rd ID. Mm-hmm. And obviously a little bit different than the Cav. There's no weird Stetsons and spurs.
Right.
In Third ID, which is fine. A lot of folks make fun of the Stetsons and spurs, which I don't know. I didn't really care that much. But Third ID has a big history, and we were in 464 armor, which was Tuskers. Mm-hmm. And their unit insignia is a black elephant with 2 white tusks. And the history of that, strange but authentic, is it was an entire black unit of African-American males and 2 white lieutenants. And they were the armor unit.
Wow.
Pretty interesting. But, going back down to Georgia, you almost have that again. There's lots of great folks down in Georgia, but it is very southern. Mm-hmm. Again, for my Hessian's tattoo, I got looked at hard. My first my first sergeant down in Third ID, First Sergeant Anderson, who had cancer and later passed away, which was awful because he was one of those guys that you could believe. He could convince you to believe in yourself, believe in the mission, like at the drop of a dime. Right. He was just either a really good car salesman or he had been doing it for a long time. And he was a bigger, huge built black dude. And he looks at my tattoo and he's like, "What is that, Pavlica?" And I explained it to him. And then, of course, all the other guys, all the staff sergeants jumped in. And I'm like thinking to myself, I was like, this is the worst mistake I've ever made.
Yeah.
So had to explain this tattoo a few times, but
yeah. And for people out there who want to get a tattoo, be careful.
Yeah. Don't do stupid stuff.
No, I subscribe to a couple of things. Don't ever get one when you've been drinking.
Yeah.
You don't buy one off the wall.
Yep.
Right. You design your tattoo and it should have some sort of meaning to you.
Yep.
And that does have meaning to you. It was just a poor design.
Yeah. And I didn't think about it back then because I wasn't brought up in that kind of weird household. Like my siblings used to go to like rock shows and punk rock shows and beat up actual Nazis and skinheads. Like right. I'm talking with bats, with wood, like, and I've seen some of it. So mm-hmm. like this didn't mean that to me in the slightest, but, so I get down to Third ID and I'm starting to get promoted and going to these really great classes, great medical classes, CLS, like combat life-saving classes, and getting really good in PT. I was in excellent shape. I was like 225 pounds with only like 13% body fat, running like, I think a 1332 mile, which isn't great, but for being 230 pounds, it was pretty good. And so I was in like the best shape of my life. I got promoted, I believe, to specialist, and they started putting me in the trainers and stuff for gunner positions. Mm-hmm. So that way your tank commander and your gunner work with each other and learn to mitigate problems, develop solutions while doing live fire exercises, but it's all in training.
Right.
And I really enjoyed that. I think that was cool. It's like a giant video game with really awful graphics.
I feel like this was almost the height of that virtual training, though. I remember like it was a big deal, right, mm-hmm. in that kind of era. I'm sure that's how they do it now. I don't know. I've been out for a while, but I feel like that's when it really started becoming a thing. Like you weren't doing live fire out on the range anymore. You were doing a lot of stuff in a trainer.
Yeah, we did so much stuff in trainers on Fort Stewart. We also did a little bit of M16 electronic range training, which was so boring. Gosh, it was so boring. But the UCOFT, I think it was UCOFT or just COFT. I can't remember. But it was, a tank simulator. You sit in a fake turret and you look at, like a tanker would, looks through the viewfinders. They put their face up against, and it's the screen. It's a computer screen.
Yeah.
But, and then you go through the calls like load Sabo, and then you'd make your selector switch from whatever it was to Sabo, and then you'd laze it. And after you do all that, you repeat 790 yards, and the tank commander would say, like, fire, and you're like firing, voomp, and it made the noise. It even had, I think, a weird pressure, or at least a big thump from a base system that made you think that there was pressure to simulate the breach coming right back by the gunner. It was really cool, and I think it was one of the more beneficial things. Plus, honestly, it saves the U.S. tax dollars a lot of money instead of sending rounds downrange, just winging it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's a substitute for shooting the real thing, but you don't
Correct.
have to shoot the real thing all the time.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So how long were you at Fort Stewart before you deployed again?
Let's see. I deployed again October '07 to December '08. So I want to say I got a little bit more than a year and a half of training.
Okay.
Because I believe I got to third ID, if I'm not mistaken, right when the unit was coming back from a deployment. So it wasn't worth it to send me out to Iraq to come back in 30 days or whatever it was.
Right.
But yeah, I deployed with Cyclone Company, 464 Armor still. And I was deployed originally. I was a driver and a loader when it was needed. And eventually worked my way up to that gunner position. And when the tank commander goes on leave, I became the tank commander for a little bit. That was super cool, being like a tank commander for like those short few days until another staff sergeant came in and like stole your thunder.
Right. But you get to tell people you were a tank commander.
At least at one point, yes.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to tell them how long.
Yeah.
Just that you were a tank commander. That's it.
Oh, man. Sergeant Durst is going to hear this and he's going to be like, you weren't shit, Pav. Shut up.
You're going to get a phone call when this goes out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, it happens. So where did you deploy this time?
Way different space. This was strictly Baghdad. COP 851, which is called, when we got there, it was called COP Norris, like Chuck Norris. And it was kind of at a 90-degree angle going south from Baghdad International Airport, and on the other end of the 90-degree angle was Fob Falcon, I think, or something pretty close to that. And the whole place was hell. It was awful, but it was way different than the first granary type building that we were in.
Right.
It was kind of like 2-story apartments that were police barracks, and all we had were some 14-foot Jersey barriers protecting us. So, and even on the balconies of the second floor, like you couldn't hang outside for too long because somebody would get a bead on you and send it around at the wall.
Wow.
So, like we had our occasional infantry guys that were like long-range qualified. I don't think they were sniper qualified, but they were capable of shooting longer ranges. They would occasionally go on the rooftop and just be like, it's not safe. And they, if like the guys that are meant to do that kind of stuff don't want to go up there, like, I'm not going to go up there and smoke a cigarette or anything.
No, not at all. I want to ask a question, though. This is really kind of off topic, but you said Norris. When I was there, it was like this big deal. Like every single porta-shitter had Chuck Norris jokes in it.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was a thing.
Yep.
And if you could think of one that wasn't on the wall, like that was really cool because you could write it on the wall. Was that kind of a thing when you were there at all?
Oh, boy. I feel like it was all weird sexual things.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure. I've seen the Chuck Norris stuff, but that was an experience. Those damn porta potties. 130 degrees in there.
You had all your stuff on.
Oh, gross.
I know.
I didn't get to say this, but the first deployment, we had to build our own bathrooms and pull the metal pot out and burn our poo and pee.
Yeah.
But this second deployment, thankfully, the retired police barracks that we were using had showers and a bathroom. Because the first deployment, we didn't even have phones or internet for like first 6 or 8 months. And this deployment, we had at least showers and toilets. And I think a lot of the guys got those cell phones in the local populace that were like way expensive.
Yeah.
But we'd call and say we're okay. And then after a little bit, we got internet. So
right.
Somehow we got lucky. But
it's amazing the things that become important.
Yeah.
Right? Like a shower and a bathroom.
At this time, too, I just started dating my now ex-wife, Michelle. And I had met her, I want to say, a few months before the second deployment. And, of course, we were at a bar in Savannah, Georgia. And I was hammered, thinking I was going home with her. And she took me home to base, thankfully.
Yeah.
But she was very nice about it. And we ended up dating throughout the deployment. But, yeah, this deployment was way different than anything else, for sure.
Yeah. So walk me through a day.
So a typical day was we did a lot of presence patrols. A lot of tankers typically do a lot of outer cordon security.
Yeah.
So when high value targets come up or there's intelligence on local munitions stock and stuff like that, the infantry guys would typically get tasked out with dealing with it. So we would pull inner or outer cordon security because, I think the tank is the biggest, baddest bitch on the block, especially with thermal capabilities and stuff like that. If we weren't doing that kind of stuff, we were running to Pavlica for mail, food, and maintenance parts, stuff like that, or whatever we would need, and bring back as much as we could for other people, or bring like I forgot they called them, the big not a semi truck, but like something similar to like a 5-ton truck with 2 doors. But anyway, supply runs and tanks would always be one in the front and one in the back, because more than likely the IED, if there's one there, they're going to go for the tank, because at the time the local really bad group was Jaish al-Mahdi militia, which is pretty equivalent to ISIS, but a little bit more savvy in their bomb-making abilities. More than likely, one of the tanks would get hit, because if they hit the one in the front, they would get paid a ton of money. If they hit one in the back, they'd still get paid good money. But the one in the front would stop, typically the column.
Right.
Because although we're trained to continue to keep going, a lot of people, we stopped, which was, unfortunate, but that's like a human thing to do, is want to stop and make sure people are okay, see if you can move your tank, blah, blah, blah. But that was the typical day. At one point, we were getting shot at, and in so much engagements, I ordered boxes of cigars from the U.S. to get shipped over there. And I think I went through like $680 worth of cigars in like 2 months.
It's a lot of cigars.
Yeah. I wasn't even like an avid smoker. Like I'd of course give them some to the guys.
Yeah.
But I love the acid cigars, which if you're a cigar smoker, I don't know like at what level like of premium enjoyment that is, but it's all sugar coated, so it tasted really good.
Yeah.
And they had lemon tea flavored ones and all sorts of stuff. But I want to say this month, ironically, I was telling my wife earlier, it's ironic I'm doing this today, but March was what we called March Madness, right? Winter's dying down. It's getting warmer in Iraq. So, like, all the scumbags are coming out. Jaish al-Mahdi militia, some extreme Shiites, whoever didn't like us. At that time, we're coming out of their holes, trying to blow us up, shooting at us randomly, etc. And we were wrapping up a right seat ride, which is when one unit is getting ready to leave, and the other unit's kind of coming in, and I would ride with a different unit so we get a lay of the land, a lay of the area. And March 15th, one of our last right seat ride patrols, we got called just south of us, I think, and I was on the tank, and one of the right seat ride guys I was with was on his unit Humvee and a gunner, which a lot of gunners are super exposed, especially in Baghdad, because there's so many buildings that are 2, 3, 4 stories tall,
right,
versus something that's 6 feet tall. And his name is O'Brien. He got promoted after he passed away, but Corporal O'Brien got shot in the head while I was out there with him on a different vehicle. And a call came over the radio that one of our guys was shot. And so I think after a second, we hightailed it back to Cop 851. And I'd learned that he passed away. And I was so, like, saddened by this because, like, we didn't hang out in the same room and play, like, board games or anything. We worked out together. We talk shit like we do. Like, oh, you can only curl 75 pounds. Like, 75 pounds is a lot, bro. Shut up. And then he'd go and curl, like, 135. Like, it's nothing.
Right.
Like, that's the kind of conversations we'd have. And I had just, like, a total, like, mental breakdown in front of the tank. Because he was, like, just turning 20 and getting ready to go home. And so, yeah. But that was the beginning, I think, of March Madness. And I actually think one of our tanks in our units took a IED shortly before that. So it was getting really chaotic. And I believe it was shortly before that. It was Staff Sergeant Martin. And he happened to be doing what we talked about earlier, kind of leaning out of the tank, making sure that the driver wasn't going to hit anything. And an IED went off, and he took shrapnel like to his dome. And, tankers, they typically don't wear Kevlars in the tanks. It's CVC. It's like a soft shell with earmuffs on it because, when stuff gets loud, you want to be able to talk to each other in the tank. And so he got hurt, I think, right around that time. He wasn't in my platoon, but I, of course, basically roomed on a different level than him and his platoon. And so March Madness was just kicking off. And I want to say March 25th. Again, with we were getting shot at way more frequently, more IEDs going off. And I think March 25th was like the most important day of my life. I'll preface this with saying like all those advanced medical classes I was trying to go to or going to get as much training as I could, like happened again for a reason.
Yeah.
And we had just come back to COP 851, which from one of those supply runs to Pavlica. And we got called right back out because a Bradley got hit with an EFP, which anybody listening is an explosively formed projectile. And basically it's a big copper bowl on the end of something similar to like a shape charge.
Right.
And it's convex at the time. So when it gets blown up, it becomes, it's concave at the time. When it blows up, either way, the bowl comes outward. So basically the round part would be hitting the vehicle. And because it's copper, the more force that it receives, the sharper it gets. So it ends up being more like a cone going through your vehicle, sharp end first. And unfortunately, that goes through tank armor like butter. And so a Bradley got hit. And we were called down there to just help secure the area. At the time, we were short on staff. Either people were on leave or we just didn't have the people. So we didn't have a loader. It was just me, Sergeant Renner, who was a recruiter, never been deployed before. So this is like his 4th week there. This is like after we've already been blown up once. And so he's like getting his cherry busted real hard.
Yeah.
And we get there and the Bradley's just on fire. And we're working up comms to talk to the guys on the ground because there's other Bradleys around, seeing like what's needed. Is there medical needed? Do we need to tow this thing? Do we need to try to put this fire out? Because anybody that knows military vehicles, that when it actually starts on fire, aside from fuel or oil, it's not going to stop.
No.
Because that metal gets so hot, just melts and burns forever, including all the rubber. And I don't remember the exact conversation, but they were like, we need a medic on the ground. And so I love medical stuff. I'm genuinely curious. If I could say I was a smart nerd, that's how I describe myself, is I love medical stuff, even if it's gruesome, gory stuff. I'm not looking up the gross stuff on the internet all the time, but mostly when I'm curious. But that was stuff when I was into. So I remember looking back. It was like tight quarters. I remember looking back at Sergeant Renner, and he gave me the thumbs up. And in the tanks, we didn't wear like plated armor, because it's so tight. And I was a bigger dude. I had a chicken vest on, which basically stops like 22, maybe 9 mil, and a T-shirt because it's hot as balls in the tank.
Right.
And so I take off my CVC and I put on my helmet. I didn't even bring nods, and it was right around getting dark time. Like I want to say like 6 or 7 p.m.-ish. And I grabbed the walk kit, which is a wounded aid and litter kit. It's a tall bag that comes with a foldable litter, a bunch of IV bags, Israeli bandages, nasal pharyngeal airways, anything you could think of that a medic would have was in there. And I'd prepped it all. Like I'm talking taped open the seals, so if my hands were bloody, I could still rip everything open. And I was like, I got to do something that is going to make a big difference. And so I grabbed my walk kit, and jumping off the tank is no small feat. I'm not jumping from the turret, thank God. I would have died. But I jumped down to the hull which is the lower part of the tank, and then jumped off. And I had my M4, my helmet, no nods, walk kit, half out of uniform, chicken vest. And I realized all this because when I land, my magazine out of my M4 falls, so I didn't seat it correctly. And I go to grab another one. It's not there because I don't have the right vest on.
Right.
So I'm like, shit. And I'm like, I can't go back up there, you know? And so I grabbed my magazine off and I took off running, and I swear it was like 500 meters. It was probably like less than 100.
Felt like forever though, huh?
Yeah, it did. And I remember running, and there's an Iraqi police truck like halfway between our tank and the Bradley. And I remember running. I was like, I hope these guys don't shoot me because I have a rifle. I'm out of uniform. There's no radio comms. We're getting shot at from like a building, I want to say probably like 60 meters away, but it was like 4 or 5 stories. Mm-hmm. I could still look at it on Google Earth. But they're like doing those weird shots where they're just, I think, slinging a rifle over the rooftop and just hoping that they hit somebody. And I didn't realize that they were doing that until I stopped behind the Iraqi police truck, and they're all looking at me, and shit's on fire, you know, so everything's kind of lit up. And I'm like, US, US, US. And they're like, okay. And that was it. And I took off running to the Bradley, but I remember that was the only time I was actually scared, is getting shot by either Iraqi police or from the rooftop. You know, I could have been mistaken for anybody, running at them in the dark with a full bag.
Right.
You know, after something just got blown up. I mean, the bag is like 3 feet tall. It is huge. And I remember going around the Bradley because, I'm sorry to go back a little bit, but this is on a canal road. So in between the east-west directions, there's like a wadi in between it. Mm-hmm. And so I had to go a little bit up past the Bradley and over this like land bridge kind of thing, and then go back to the Bradley. But I remember looking, I'm like, all the doors are closed. And I look over to my right. Now I'm facing my tank way off in the distance because I did about a 180. And there's a guy on the ground, flashlights, and 2 Americans and some Iraqi police there trying to figure out like what to do. And I rolled up, and I don't even remember being winded, but I'm sure I was having trouble talking. And the 2 guys on the ground working on this guy were like his best friends. So they were, I'm not trying to call them out, obviously, but they were, one of them, I think at least, was an actual medic, mm-hmm. and he was just like clicked off. He was fumbling. He didn't know what to do. And I looked at it from a logical perspective as much as I could. Like, there's somebody here that needs help. I'm going to start with an IV. And so I go on my knees next to him. My walk kit's just thrown on the ground because that shit is so heavy after a little bit. And I'm like, okay, like, hold the light here. The Iraqi police guy holds his rifle with the light on. Like, in my general area at this point, I don't even care if it's loaded or not.
Right.
And we hoist him up on the litter first that we took out of my bag. And he is completely burnt naked. Like, there's no hair on his body. There's no eyelids, so he can't close his eyes. And the only thing that's left, and I don't want this to sound like weird and cliche, but the only thing that was left was like a partially burnt American flag patch on his shoulder, mm-hmm. and like part of his belt. Mm-hmm. But that was like burnt onto him as a part of him. And his medic friend, there's 2 U.S. people. I don't know if both of them are medics, but they were freaking out. And understandably so. That's their buddy,
right? That's
down there,
right?
And I start, hooking up all the IV kit, the bag, and I'm getting ready to go in for a flash, which is when you stick somebody with an IV to get them fluids. The needle, you should see a little bit of blood come back up once you get a good vein.
Yeah.
And as soon as I went to go do that, the Iraqi accidentally either got his leg wrapped around the IV cable or stepped on the bag. Something happened. So I was like, if I save this dude, I'm not going to let him get sick. So I started in a different IV, completely different kit. And the first thing that I tried to do was go in his elbow, and I could not find a vein. This is all within, I want to say, like a minute. It was not long. And then I tried going to his thigh where I could see a vein. Definitely nothing crazy, but when I went to go attempt to get a flash, the needle actually kind of bent. And because his skin was like leather hard.
Right.
And once his friends saw that, they were like in disbelief. And obviously they were so shocked. So I was like, fuck this. I was like, let's load him up in the Bradley and take him to the green zone. I'll try to give him another IV when we get in there. So the Bradley backs up and the big door drops. And they're still all homies in the back, and they haven't seen anything. And so, like, we're bringing in this litter with Sergeant McCoy, who everybody is shocked to see. Like, I'm trying to make this descriptive for importance, but he was burnt naked to the point where he couldn't close his eyes.
Right.
And so all his friends are seeing that. And we sit him kind of diagonally in the back, but on all of our laps, because that's all there's room for, the litter. And I end up getting a good IV. And I remember, like, holding his hand and talking to him.
Sorry, man.
Shit.
So he's conscious through all of this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Take a breather.
But oh man. So I get the third IV and this Bradley is just hauling ass, screaming all the way to the green zone. And, they get him out in surgery, and then they bring me back to Cop 851, and somehow I didn't have a radio, so somehow part of my platoon came up to get me.
Yeah.
And I got a ride back, and I'm going to say it like, God, I want to say the sun was rising at this point. But, yeah, we get back to Cop 851, and it turns out my platoon sergeant, the other section of my tanks, were sent out after we left to help.
Uh-huh.
And after that, we have to, like, give up our uniforms so they can burn it and stuff. Or, get rid of it because I had blood and stuff all over me. But
You can take a break.
yeah, probably.
Okay. We can take a break. Okay. Whew. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're back at your
Oh yeah, Cop 851.
yeah, back at your cop.
And yeah, all my uniform is, I think, bagged up because it needs to be either destroyed or whatever it is. And my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Canute, he obviously came up, talked to me to see if I was okay and stuff. And he's like, I'm pretty sure he said something along the lines of, "Did you hear me on the radio?" Or something like that. Mm-hmm. I feel like he was trying to reach me at some point. But I was like, no, Sergeant, I didn't have radio. I didn't have anything. And I didn't even have a spare mag. And he's he goes on to tell me, and I think he did this deliberately so that way I could process it. But he goes on to tell me, like, Sergeant McCoy was not the only victim, that everybody else was still trapped inside. And so, obviously, all those people passed away. But
that's why all the doors were still closed.
yeah, I mean, they were welded shut pretty much, is what I was told. I didn't go back to the site, but the other sections and the rest of the platoon did.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want I think it was a different company. The other companies, like friends, basically picking up their bodies.
Right.
But I guess so on the Bradley, the front hatch opens up, and that's typically how the driver gets in and out with ease. I guess that was welded shut almost immediately, or had a malfunction on the locking mechanism of some kind. And I guess he was alive, like flicking the lights on and off, trying to get attention, because it had become, nighttime at that point.
Right.
And I was on the side of the Bradley about 30 feet off and a little bit behind it, so obviously I didn't see any of that. And so Sergeant McCoy was the only one to make it up and out. Everybody else was trapped inside. But anyway, from the drop-off to the green zone, he got medevaced somewhere like that. I'm pretty sure there was a helicopter either landing or taking him or something. But I think he got moved to a different surgical zone. Maybe the helicopter wasn't even for him now I think about it. But he ended up living for like another 6 months. And then from the wounds sustained, he passed away in June 2008. And so, yeah.
His family got to see him then before he passed away, do you know?
So I believe there's not much information about this.
Yeah.
And it's hard to really find even the history of the incident, because it actually was the incident that brought our death toll over 2,000 or over 3,000. I forget which number in Iraq. So I'm sure it made like headlines, but then, you could Google this stuff and it's hard to find.
Yeah.
But from what I've read, I think he was stable. They moved him to Germany, and then I believe they moved him to a medical center in the U.S., but he did eventually pass away, like I want to say 4 months later or so in June. But I believe his wife got to hang out with him in that time frame.
Yeah. So he did some good.
I'd like to think so. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That whole CLS thing saves lives. I felt it was so necessary to take like that kind of training before I left, because it wasn't just like how to pack an Israeli bandage. They were showing us how to do like the sternum IVs. Yep.
And all that, the crazy stuff. Like, I don't know anybody like this, but like if you were an SF medic, this is probably like a very baseline of medical training for them. And I was like, I need to know all this stuff. Like, I'm interested in it, and I feel like it's going to come in handy. And, it did.
Yeah.
And after like a day or two, Specialist Bell was his name. He was a medic. He was like our badass, in shape, 5'5" medic that he was like cut from stone. He was amazing, incredibly intelligent dude. And he would always hop in our tanks in the loader position because we were always short on people. He'd be like, y'all need a medic on this mission, right? And we'd be like, hell yeah, come on. He would be the guy in a gunfight that you could totally count on.
Yeah.
Of all the weird gunfights and stuff like that, that's the guy I would want to have like right next to me, aside from being medic to fix me up. But I don't even know if he was a good shot, but he was like right there with you in the shit. And I talked to him and I was like, is there anything else like I could have done? Like immediately, like again, 2 days later after this, I think about this a lot, but analytically I was asking 2 days later after this ordeal. Like, is there something I should have done differently or better? And he's like, the only thing you could have done was put petroleum gauze on his wounds, and he wasn't really bleeding, he said. And there's not much else that could have been done. Like, I don't think there was any type of IO or something like that type of IV. That I don't think that was in our walk kits, because that's a little bit high of a level for some dumb grunt tankers to carry around, you know, because we'd probably just end up messing with it at some point.
Somebody would get hurt.
Yeah. Or have a lot of fun.
Yeah. Or both.
But there's really nothing else that could have been done. And aside from that last part, also keep in mind, this is while I was dating my former ex-wife at the time. We went to the military ball, you know, when we got back, and I listened to his wife talk, and I don't know, there wasn't, everybody's looking at me on the table, like waiting for a reaction. I'm just sitting there, and I don't know if I said her name, and I don't know if I should, but my now ex-wife at the time, she's like, what is everybody looking at you for? She's like whispering it to me while Sergeant McCoy's wife is talking. And the lieutenant at the time turned around, and he's like, that's the guy Sergeant Pavlica rescued, as if I wasn't like at the table.
Right.
Like he's telling everybody, it's like, everybody knows, sir, shut up. Like, let her talk. And yeah, I obviously didn't like go home and divulge everything to her.
Right.
Because, you know, it's scary. It's hard to talk about, and like, I don't know. If you're not there, it's hard to understand like the experience.
Well, I think it's difficult when you've lived through those sorts of things, and people who don't understand ask questions, and then they don't understand when you tell them, and so you really just get to the point where you just don't talk about it, or you talk about it with people who will understand it, which are few and far between the longer that you're out of the military. I want to go back a little bit, though. How much longer did you have on deployment?
Gosh.
After that?
I was there till December 2008, and this is March.
Okay, so you're not even halfway through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then with the continuing March Madness stuff, I think we got hit with our second EFP. I wish I could remember the dates of the EFPs, but it was just March Madness. It was insane. We were extra cautious, and we were going down, I think, Route Ash by Cop 851, which was black. You weren't supposed to go down it unless EOD recently cleared it, type of thing. And I think they did, or I think a unit just went through, so we were okayed to go down there. And I think we were doing a presence patrol, and the Iraqi army is there, the Iraqi police, and no civilians were allowed to be on the rooftops, you know, because they could be watching for a good time to set off their IED. It could be sniper fire, whatever.
Right.
And they weren't supposed to be up there. And it was after the second EFP. So we're patrolling this area, and our tank just got hit like recently, so we got a new tank because the other one's getting fixed.
Yeah.
And so my coaxial machine gun, which is right next to the main gun tube, and I'm the gunner, was not zeroed. We just went out into a war zone with like an unproven gun. Like it's like a Ghost in the Darkness quote, like, you went into battle with an unproven rifle. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I have not. I'm gonna have to check it out though.
You need to watch it like tonight. It's so good. But anyway, so my coaxial machine gun wasn't zeroed. Nobody's supposed to be on rooftops. There's a guy on a rooftop, and it looks like he's smoking and on a phone, which is pretty standard for like your 30 to 40 to 50-year-old male in the Iraqi household. He's on the rooftop, and I got the go-ahead, I guess, to engage him. And I remember the conversation was something like, is he doing anything suspicious? And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I don't know. Like, I had some zoom in the gunner's sights, but nothing crazy. He wouldn't look at us. So it's not like he was like, dodging around corners, like looking at us. And I remember it feels like a bloodlust thing because we had just gotten so fucked up and blown up and shot up, and I just wanted to like lay lead. And you know, I engaged him, but I was like, I don't want to kill this dude. So knowing my coaxial wasn't 0, this is about probably 80 yards away. So the gun tube probably looked like it was pointing up in the air almost.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to shoot at the bottom of the steps and scare him. I'm not going to tell anybody that's what I'm doing, you know, because I was angry and I was frustrated. But then it clicked. I was like, this guy's probably just going up for morning prayer, smoking a cigarette. Like, what the fuck am I doing? And I engaged the stairs, and I was doing it for a couple rounds. I was like, like that, probably like a 2-second hold on the gunner controls. And I got a runaway gun, which is when the machine gun continues to fire even after you deliberately let go of a trigger.
Right.
And the rounds actually started going up and then went into his legs, into his hip, and into his ribs. And at that point, I finally realized what was happening. That was probably like 15 rounds within 5 or 6 seconds. I grabbed the charging cable and held it down so it would stop firing. Because it's kind of awkward. You're in this tight little spot, and then you got to reach up and try to grab the cable so it stops firing. But they called it a good engagement or whatever. And I remember I was like, I looked at Sergeant Renner. I was like, that's not what was supposed to happen, you know? And Sergeant Renner was like, don't look Pavlica. I don't think I was a sergeant yet. But like, don't look Pavlica. And I looked. And his wife and daughter are like dragging his body off a rooftop.
Right.
And it was just like, it didn't click then. Like, that wasn't the first time I had killed somebody, but it was the first time I had zoomed in and like inspected, you know, the damage that I had done. And it wasn't deliberate, like in the slightest. Like, yeah, I was angry. I was probably bloodlusty. I probably wanted to hurt somebody after the last couple of weeks, but like I deliberately aimed low, and that's what happened. And like to this day, that's like something I think about. But yeah, that happened, I want to say, right after Sergeant McCoy had been evac'd out and that whole incident. But again, that was like March Madness, and it wasn't even a month. It was like probably like 50 days of just insane, like other tanks getting blown up. Jay Shalmati's filming it, like from far away. Like they would put cameras up on mopeds, zoomed all the way in. And I think a couple of my friends have videos of their tanks getting blown up. And I have one too of us getting blown up that was filmed from behind. Just north of Raudash. That was another EFP. And I want to say right around that time, at that time, my tank commander was Sergeant Renner. Sergeant Durst was on White 3. He was the tank commander. I was on White 2, so a different section. Excuse me. And again, he was rolling out the gate and kind of leaning over because he had been a tanker forever. He was like a hardcore, dusty tanker, dude. He's such a fucking good dude. He still is to this day. But he was leaning out of the tank, making sure that like nothing weird was going to get ran over, you know, because we weren't there to destroy everything. But
right.
You want to make sure that the tank wasn't running over concertina wire or a barrier or something. And I don't know if it was just an IED or EFP, but it went off right by that front gate. And I remember I was up in my room, and I think the barracks was about 50 feet from the front gate. And so it was loud. So we all got our shit on. We ran outside, and the tanks are rolling in, and we're like, oh, they got lucky. And you see them back the tanks up, which, you know, if there's an emergency, they're just going to stop the tank back in the little cop. And they're all going to get off and dismount and call the medics and stuff. That wasn't what was happening. They moved the tanks, and they backed it up into their spots. And then you see Sergeant Durst, who, keep in mind, is again that dusty, crusty tanker that's been a tanker forever, and he loved most of what he was doing, like the big gnarly shit. Everybody loves that. But he got off the tank with the CVC, and his head is bleeding, and there's blood running down his face, and he's just shaking like this, and he's trying to light a cigarette hopping off the tank. And I'm like, Sergeant Durst, he's like, you need to come down. And then another platoon sergeant from a different platoon, not Sergeant Canute, our platoon sergeant, but I think it was the infantry platoon. No, he's Sergeant Smith was the other tanker platoon sergeant. He's like, come on, Durst, I'll help you down or whatever. He's like, leave me the fuck alone. Give me a lighter. And, like, he's bleeding. Yeah. And he just wanted to smoke a cigarette. So I was like, oh, my God. At least he's talking, wanting to smoke. So I don't think there's that much wrong with him. And, you know, it turns out the shrapnel really skinned part of his head and kind of got lodged, I think, not even in the skull part, but, like, in the skin and stuff. So the medics were working on him upstairs. But I just remember him, like, shaking his hand so profusely, the one the cigarette was in. He couldn't light his cigarette because it was so violently shaking from getting blown up. And the deployment or two before that, he lost, like, one of his best friends to an IED. Uh-huh. And he had gotten shrapnel, he got shrapnel this time, and I watched him get his Purple Heart, and he was just bawling. Mm-hmm. So, but, yeah, and then, I think we did some more, like, basic presence patrols and stuff like that. We did a lot of stuff for the local community. Mm-hmm. Like, we did security while the engineers built, like, soccer fields, school buildings, and put up ESCO areas around the schools and stuff so kids could go to school and play soccer and stuff, because, of course, that's the big thing over there, soccer or football. But that was really the bulk of that deployment. Like, it was just, like, 2 months or so of just insane stuff. And years later, something clicked. And my first deployment, there was this young sergeant when I was a private, and I was watching Black Hawk Down, mm-hmm. right? And he came up to me, and he's like, you know, Private Pavlica, like, nothing like that is ever going to happen to you because this war is boring. And it turned out to be, like, the exact opposite, my second deployment. And there's been so many times where I'm friends with him, obviously. He's still around. So many times I wanted to message him and be like, that's never going to happen. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah. Like, be a total smart ass to him, but I don't even think he'd remember that. But, like, weird things click like that mm-hmm. after so many years. But the rest of the deployment, I don't want to say it was chill, but it was definitely not like March Madness. And then, you know, I came home and was still dating my now ex-wife at the time, and went to that military ball where I heard Sergeant McCoy's wife talk, and we tried to party. I've never been a drinker. Like, I tried to party, and it just was not fun to me. And, like, for probably, like, an hour or two of drinking, it was probably fun, but, like, not afterwards. And then shortly after that, again, we all split up and got different orders to go do something else, which I think is the worst. I don't know if it's the worst, but I've never been in a command situation. But, like, splitting up your guys to go do other stuff after you have gone through so much is, I don't know, like, an awful choice I think, to do.
It's like losing all your best friends at once.
Yeah. And it's like, you never know what they're going to do, if they're going to deploy again, get hurt, or, you know, have a pogue-ass job where they're checking receipts at the PX or something, right, you know, ridiculous like that, which I would totally make fun of them for. But, you know, I think that's a part of the military. And granted, you get to train new soldiers. You get to meet new great leadership NCOs, maybe some LTs that don't look like a bag of smashed assholes. You know, meet some great people, train with great people, and do that kind of stuff. But in going back to that second deployment, you know, you mentioned you had a really young soldier. Yeah. My second deployment, I had a soldier. His last name's John, so I'm not afraid to say that because there's millions of them. But when we went to NTC in California, he was 17. I had to buy him cigarettes. And I ended up bunking with him, and we went to war together. And it's just the craziest thing to think about is this young kid, like I just deployed with and went through all this crazy shit with. And, now he's a teacher somewhere in Kansas. Yeah. So it's cool to think about. But he was so young, I had to buy his cigarettes. So
it's funny to see those guys now, too, because they're adults.
Yeah.
We had a guy, one of our medics, Gazicki, and loved him. He's a great medic. He was always on it. He's just one of those guys you wanted to be, wanted around you. Mm-hmm. And I went to a party a couple of years ago, and he was there. I didn't recognize him. I didn't know who he was because he was 17, 18 when I knew him. And he's a man now, and he's completely changed. He got so mad at me because I didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
I mean, the minute he said who he was, and started talking, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. But, just see him on the street, I wouldn't have known him. But we lived pretty tight for over a year together.
Yeah.
But, yeah, they all grow up.
Yeah.
They all become adults.
Thankfully, the soldier I was just referring to, John, he did not change.
Yeah.
He looks like he's like maybe 19 now, but really he's like got to be 29 or 30 or something now.
Yeah.
But
good for him.
Yeah, I know.
You still have to buy him cigarettes.
Wait till you're 35, bro.
Yeah. It'll all hit you. So you after you got back, did you actually get orders to go someplace else then?
Yeah.
Did that cause you to get married? Or did
yes.
Okay.
That's the next not as upset part, but
yeah.
We got married shortly after I got back from deployment. We were going through some rough patches, and when you're young, you're like, maybe marriage will fix this. I love you. I'm only talking to you. I haven't talked to anybody else. I don't know if you have, but I've been gone.
Right.
And anybody that's in the military knows those stories, so I'm not going to go through that. But we thought it would fix things. We got married at the courthouse in Savannah, Georgia, moved up to Fort Knox, and I ended up in 16 Cav, which is like a total POGAS unit, like training lieutenants, supporting lieutenants, all that stuff. They're going through like BOLIC, Army Recon, combatives, all that stuff. Anything from Navy, not really Navy, but we had Marine Corps officers and Army officers, obviously. And it was a joke. But I found myself mountain biking a lot more, which I still ride to this day. I've been riding since I was 13. And I started racing, and I used to race downhill mountain bikes. And that's when they're like ripping down a ski resort mountain on trails like rock gardens, big drops, road gaps, like the scariest shit. That's how I've broken all my bones, but it was mountain biking.
Yeah, the most dangerous thing you did was get on a mountain bike.
Yeah. I got this cool scar right here, my left clavicle. It goes right through my tattoo. I've got a big bar right here.
Yeah.
That was the easiest one to deal with. Oof. But I found myself like meeting these mountain bikers, Jeff, his wife, Nikki, a couple other locals, and it was like 5 minutes from Fort Knox. So I was always, like, hey, I'm going to go ride to the wife. Mm-hmm. And my friend Mike and Zakara, who are actually from Michigan, that I met through another random Michigan person while I was deployed. They were really cool, great people. I love them. They're like family. They came to stay in my apartment with my now ex-wife for a couple of days till they get all their stuff shipped and get moved in. And during that time frame, we were going through another rough patch, and I started talking to a random girl. Like, I totally got, what do they call it, catfished.
Yeah.
This girl was in another state. I was just, like, stupid, and I was really disrespectful about it. But I was like, I don't like you anymore. I know we're married, but I'm going to talk to this girl. It's just the most scumbag thing you could do. And I would never wish that on anybody, because shortly after, later down the years, the same thing happened to me. But roles are reversed.
Right.
Anyway, and that couple I was just talking about, Mike and Takara, they were called last time when I just saw them like a year or two ago. No, probably 2 years ago, down in Georgia. They're like, do you remember when she was getting pissed and throwing plates and breaking them in front of us because you wanted to go ride mountain bikes? I was like, no. Was she doing that? And I was shocked. And they had they remembered where things were in my apartment, so I knew like they didn't mix me up with anybody else.
Right.
And she was throwing tantrums because I wanted to go ride bikes like once or twice a week for like an hour or two at a time, or build some sweet jumps and stuff. And she wanted to do like coffee shopping, which was fun once in a while, and do other shopping type activities. And she was getting mad because I wanted to ride bikes, and I wanted to do something that wasn't sit there with her all day, every day, sitting at home. And so, right after that is when I started talking to that girl. We ended up getting divorced because I was being stupid about it. But I helped move all her stuff back down to Savannah, Georgia. And then after that, the divorce came. And after the divorce, she stopped by to see me, and she got pregnant with my child.
Oh.
So another poor decision you make sometimes when you're dumb. But like, I'm really thankful. My daughter and her actually live in Mason. So when things are not bad, I get to see my daughter.
Right.
Unfortunately, I got a lot of the paperwork when I was out in the field at Fort Knox training lieutenants. I think it was an Army recon class. I got paperwork, and I was just like, F it, I'm just going to sign this. Basically, didn't read it, didn't go to JAG with it, and gave away all my rights to see my daughter. Like, the stupidest thing I think I've ever done. And that was that. I popped home when I could on leave to see her and hang out with her, and missed most of her growth because she's going to be turning 15 in June. And she's this like gorgeous little blonde girl who just like, when I do get to hang out with her, I see all this resemblance from me, my attitude, the same facial expressions. And I'm like, God, I've missed so much stuff. So stupid. But I was having like a hard time at first when I'd come home and she was like around the age of 1-ish. I'd have a hard time hanging out with her because I remember that daughter carrying her dad from the rooftop.
Yeah.
Would just click, like when I parked the car in the driveway type of thing. It wasn't even when I saw her. It was like during that moment where like you have a time to take a deep breath, like only when I parked the car or when I knocked on the door and there's that weird moment of silence where nothing's happening, it would click. And then I'd want to just hang out with her for like an hour or two and then I'd leave. And it was, I'm positive Michelle thought I was like avoiding the daughter thing. And maybe sometimes I was, but it was like, it was hard to deal with. One of the things that happened during the divorce is she called the chaplain's office. And I was really good with the chaplain in my unit. I actually tattooed his finger.
Oh.
He was a weird dude, but he was super cool. And we got on like a 3-way call, and it's like 9 o'clock at night, and I have to be to work the next morning. So I'm like ready to shower, get my uniform ready, and I got to be to work to draw weapons or something for these lieutenants at like 4:30 in the morning or 5. And the first thing we start talking about is chaplain's like, she says you're a changed man. And I was like, well, she dated me for like 3 months. And he's like, yeah, but like the stuff you've went through. And I was like, I know. Like, I know what I went through. Like, have I tried to talk to her about that kind of stuff? I don't think so. But like, then of course I got defensive, I'm sure at some point. And I was like, if you want to know what it was like, you should have been there with me. But of course, that's, everybody has a choice, like
right.
That's kind of a fucked up thing to say, but that's a lot of how I thought about some of that stuff. And anyway, after the divorce and after missing some of my child's growing pains and opportunities, I started coming home more and trying to spend more time with her. But that weird vision, I guess, would always click. And it's only like a fraction of a second, but it's enough to ruin everything. Like ruin dinner, birthday parties. I wouldn't like freak out and walk out or anything like that, but it would just click. And my now ex-wife's family would be like, are you okay? Because I would be stone-faced.
Right.
Like just thinking about it for a second. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, it's totally fine. Like they didn't know anything about that either. So, they might really think I'm a disgusting person, and which is fine. Like I totally get it from both angles.
I think that people don't realize something about military people, and that is we're really good at lying.
Yeah.
we're fine. I'm fine. There's nothing wrong. I'm good. You know, in the meantime, you're wanting to jump off a building.
Yeah.
Right. But we're really good. Like if we were just honest, which we can't be because the things that we know and the things that we've done are so painful that we don't want to share them with other people. But if we just did, it'd go a long way in explaining how we are who we are and maybe some of the stupid shit we've done. It's not an excuse.
Yeah.
But certainly it sheds some light on how we are. But we're really good about lying about how we feel about things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, speaking of that, before I go back into topic, my now wife, who's amazing, when we first started dating, we're like doing the 21 questions all the time. Like we've been dating for a year and I'm still like, so what's your favorite kind of cake? You know, just cute, weird shit like that. And we always got to the point is like, how do you handle disagreements and arguments? And until I met her, it was always let it roll for the night. And if it really bothers me the next day, I'll bring it up. With her, I want to fix shit immediately.
Let's
and
talk
she
about
does
it.
not like that.
Right.
So she's more on that playing field that I was before. But me, like, if we get into a fight or an argument, like, I know she's never going to cheat on me.
Yeah.
The only time I would be that angry at you is if you did cheat on me. So I'm always wanting to hammer shit out right away and fix it right away. So I go back to loving you or you loving me or whatever it is. And
so you don't understand that fighting has something to do with whether you love the person or not, right?
Oh yeah, I get that. But it's just like it's more volatile when you have a large amount of disdain towards somebody, which I did with my now ex-wife.
Right.
But like anyway, back to we're gonna get to her lovely life in a little bit. Where were we? Riding bikes, she was breaking stuff. You're divorced.
So you're divorced, you're kinda hanging out with your daughter now.
Yeah, more so, like around 2012 or so. And around, I think at the end of 2011, I got more orders to go back down to Georgia. And I was like, wonder if I'm just doing something cool, because before I got to help train Rangers, not in like a major way, like I wasn't a Ranger or anything.
Right.
But I got to help them do combatives training. I got to help them set up for RASP, which was like pre-Ranger training. I would be, in the field, like watching their instructors talk, and I picked up so much stuff. Those guys are just amazing groups of people. But I was able to contribute it's a support element to that time era. And gosh, where were we going with that?
Oh, you got orders to Georgia.
Oh, yeah. So, and no, I'm staying with 16 Cav training lieutenants. I'm like, okay, well, this first time at Fort Knox was a cakewalk. Like my lunch, I would take 2 hours and go ride mountain bikes, And right before we moved to Knox, I got a new staff sergeant, and at the time I'd been promoted. Dang, I forgot to tell that story too. But his name was Staff Sergeant Perez. Happiest dude ever. Just like Reggie was like happy. But when something bad happened and it's your fault, he was like your dad. Oh. He was like, I'm not angry. I'm just really disappointed in you, Sergeant Pavlica. And
which hurts more. I'd rather have somebody be angry at me than disappointed.
It was so bad because you knew how happy he was and how caring of an NC. I've never met a more caring leader in my life. And so I met him. We moved down to Fort Knox or whatever. Oh, I'm sorry, Fort Benning, Georgia, from Fort Knox. And he knew I was into mountain biking, racing. I was picking up sponsor deals with like bike teams. At one point, I was on Billy Goat Bikes, which was sponsored by Smith Optics, Rocky Mountain Bicycles, later Da Vinci Cycles, POC, and a bunch of. I would get huge discounts on like top gear, dude. It was the coolest experience. And you could talk to him about that, and he'd be like, "Why don't you take off?" I'd be like, "What do you mean, Sergeant?" He's like, "You got your bike in your truck, man. Go." He's a Mexican dude too, so he had an accent.
Yeah.
But like, he'd be like, "You don't have to wait till midnight to sign out on Thursday." He's like, "I'll sign you out on Friday morning when I come to PT," or something weird like that. And I would already skip out and be where I needed to be by Friday evening. Instead, I'd be there by like Thursday night, like ready to go. He he genuinely cared and was like, everything's taken care of. I got this. Like, go ride your bike, Pavlica. And that's what he would say. Mm-hmm. And, oh, man, he used to get me out of so much stuff to go ride bikes. Like, if there's some shitty detail, he'd be like, Sergeant Pavlica, I've got him doing this. And he'd just be like, scoot, you know.
That's pretty awesome.
He was a great dude.
Yeah.
And going back real quick, on that second deployment, shortly, like I want to say a month or two after working on Sergeant McCoy, this story's going to come back around with Sergeant Perez, but they had me drawn up for a Bronze Star with a V device or something like that, mm-hmm. and I can't remember like the exact awards, like what they put me in for versus what I got, and they downgraded it to just an RCOM because I didn't have my proper gear on, and so they brought me onto Fob Falcon, and General Petraeus was there, and everybody's like, "Look sharp, dress in a good uniform." And I just got promoted. Sergeant Pavlica, you're going to go in formation. I was like, I don't want to do that. You know, I was still in the March Madness mode, so I was like, I don't give a fuck who this guy is. And he was a huge dude, obviously. He's a very important guy back then. And so I line up in this formation against my will. And again, this is during March Madness, so forgive my, I guess, arrogance at this time. But General Petraeus is giving everybody coins, mm-hmm. and some colonel is reading off what that soldier or lieutenant did to earn that coin, you know. And so I'm in formation with like 16 people or something, and not one of those stories other than mine was combat related. It was all like maintenance supplied. These 4 Humvees were fixed in 48 hours, and these MRAPs were delivered to Fob, I don't know, whatever, Anaconda or something within 2 days. And I was angry that I was in the same realm as these people that are just doing their job.
Yeah.
And so I was, again, that's the arrogance part on my end. As soon as I got out of formation, I tossed the coin and the certificate in the trash, and I got my ass chewed by, I think, a full bird colonel and somebody else shortly after. And our CO at the time was like, I'll handle it, Sergeant Pavlica. He's like, just stand by for a minute. And that was it. But I was like, you know, there was too much going on, dude. There was just, to put me in formation and to give me anything.
Right.
Like, even a handshake, I don't want that, dude. Like, how about some clean drinking water, bro?
Yeah.
You know?
How about something that doesn't taste like diesel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so back to Sergeant Perez. Somebody had told him what I did, because I didn't go around, like, you don't go around with an RCOM and be like, I got this, you know?
So the difference between, personal opinion here, the difference between soldiers who have really done something and soldiers who have not really done something is the stories they tell.
Yeah.
Like the guys who don't talk, but very, very infrequently, are the guys who've really seen something.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we could have probably hung out for a couple of weeks. If we weren't doing this right now, I wouldn't know all that about you.
Yeah.
We'd have to be friends for a while before you would share any of that.
I think Mickus, oh gosh, I don't know if I should say that, if I should say a name on this.
That's okay. Everyone knows who Mickus is.
Okay.
We love our Mickus.
He knows like part of the story, like not the in-depth stuff I told you.
Yeah.
And then, like, I think with Ben that you're meeting this upcoming weekend, him and I were joking around about who had like more badass jobs. So I just sent him a screenshot of that RCOM, and he's like, "Oh, you just carry that around with you?" And I was like, "No, dude. Like 3 people have seen it."
Right.
Like, well, I mean,
but if you're at the local VFW and there's that guy talking about all the, there I was in the shit, you know immediately it's all bullshit.
You can spot those guys before you talk to them.
Absolutely.
But
anyway, I digress.
I kept it in my like Google Drive because I was applying at the time for contracting positions overseas. Mm-hmm. I was like, these guys only hire like retired CAG operators, Delta guys. I was like, this is my only cool shit that I have on paper to slide in there. Maybe I'll get a job. That's the only reason it's there. Yeah. I don't have it printed out on a wall or anything. But going back to the coin, Sergeant Perez had heard about it, and he had asked me, Sergeant Pavlica, what'd you do with that? And he already knew because I told him, and he's like, is that really what happened? And I'm like, yes, Sergeant. And he's like, good on you, Sergeant Pavlica. Like, he's like, don't take no crap from no one. Like, and he was just that joyful dude.
Yeah.
And well, so we're back at Benning and training all these lieutenants again. I got to go to some cool training. I wish I would have gone to more, dude, because it's government money, and they had so many cool training opportunities. I got to go to escape and evasion training in California, not SEER,
Right.
but where they drop you off with a group dude in a simulated Black Hawk crash in Death Valley, and you have to survive and evade the enemy for like 3, 4, or 5 days or something like that. Then they were kind of testing this from what I remember. And we got to do all sorts of cool stuff, evading the enemy. And then, like, I got to help with pre-ranger school, which, oh, God, dude, just, like, listening to those guys talk and watching them shoot on the range and ruck and do land nav, I'm like, that shit is so cool. But I paid as much attention as I could, as long as I was welcome in the classroom, didn't disrupt, and I helped when I could. Because, you know, everybody has those thoughts about wanting to go warrant or wanting to go to be group guy and stuff like that. And so I was trying to pay attention. I was like, this is my excuse. I know I want to get out, but I'm going to hang out here. And, God, Army Recon, RASP, Air Assault, Airborne. I got to assist and support, like, so many cool classes and then do additional cool training. So I knew how to support. And I guess, I don't know, stuff to look for, like shitty garbage-ass equipment. You also don't want to send, like, a brand new spanking M4, the Ranger, that's going to go swimming in the swamp with it,
Right.
You know?
Right.
But, like, I was able to learn so much cool stuff in those few years that I was stationed around Fort Benning and going to different schools during that time frame. And then I broke my clavicle 4 weeks after I broke my hip on the same race course on the same hill in Snowshoe, West Virginia. So obviously I'm mountain biking a lot more.
Yeah.
Sergeant Perez is getting me out of work. I have a little Kia. I just strap my bikes to the back, dude. That thing kicks ass on gas. I'm going all the way up to Virginia from Georgia. I'm going to New York, everywhere to race bikes. And so on the race course, I broke my hip. I was pedaling into like a super floaty jump. It wasn't like anything huge. It was like 2 or 3 feet, but the landing was like 15 feet that way past the jump. And if you were pedaling harder, you could launch even further. And I'd been hitting it all day just fine. And I pedaled into it real hard. And when my pedal stroke came down, the pedal hit a rock. And my bike turned sideways. I went hip first into the jump on my left hip and cartwheeled off. And smoked the back of my helmet. Thank God I had a full face on. I didn't find that out till later. But I guess I was laying there. And people were riding by asking if I was okay. Because I hadn't enough sense to move my bike and myself off the race course.
Right.
And I guess from what I understand, I was laying there smoking a cigarette, like paint me like one of your French girls laying. And
I get the reference.
Yeah, like I was just laying there in the dirt, like, and I didn't think anything was wrong. And ski patrol or bike patrol, same thing, from my understanding, was looking for me, and they found me hiking my bike on my shoulder up the hill through like the soft grass. And I don't remember any of that. And they were yelling at me on the lift to stop, like, we're coming to help you. And I don't remember any of that. I was just smoking cigarettes and carrying like a 50-pound bike with a broken hip up the hill. And 45-minute, hospital ride later, they gave me an IV bag with some hardcore pain meds. And with every human emotion, like on the spectrum, like sadness, happiness. I was flirting with the EMT chick in front of her husband. They were laughing. I was depressed. Everything that you could imagine I went through in that 45-minute hospital ride, which again was like 10 miles, but up in the mountains, it's longer. And the doctor was like, did you hit your head? I'm like, I don't think so. Like, they just gave me x-rays. I knew my hip was broken, so the doctor was reviewing stuff with me. And there was a spot on the back of my helmet that was about 4 inches long, and about 2 inches wide that looked like it had sat on the back of somebody's exhaust on their motorcycle. Mm-hmm. I hit the back of my head of my helmet that hard on a rock that it made that mark.
Wow.
And so if I hadn't been wearing it, I would have died if I'd been wearing a different helmet. And so, I have like a hairline fracture in my left hip. I end up doing 2 practice runs on Saturday and sore, hot tub, in and out, swimming pool, in and out, Motrin, and Tylenol 3, which made me sick. That's why I guess I'm not a big drinker. I'm not a big pill popper either.
Right.
But Tylenol 3 got me through the day. And then my race run, I crashed again, but didn't get hurt, got back up and finished 5th place somehow in a tier 2 race, with seasoned racers. And then 4 weeks later on almost the identical racetrack on a different jump, what we call a step down. So it's like a jump, but instead of the landing being on an equal horizontal area, this is sloped down way more and the landing's way further out. Mm-hmm. I was like, I sent this all week, a couple weeks ago, and I sent it. And when I landed, my bike bounced and my back tire kind of threw me over the handlebars. And I landed with my arms out and broke my clavicle. And yeah, that was a 10-hour drive back on Motrin from Snowshoe to Georgia with my dog, who was scared shitless of riding the truck, so I couldn't tell her to hop in there. I had to hoist her up with one arm. But shortly after that, my first sergeant found out that I was racing mountain bikes, and he was an incoming first sergeant. He'd only been part of the unit for 2 or 3 months, so he was very angry with me. And I want to say that happened around fallish, and in spring I was totally healed up, and it was 2012-ish, I think, at this point in the spring. I raced in Clemson, South Carolina, and I qualified for a U.S. national championship, which is sometimes easy to do from my understanding, sometimes really incredibly hard to do, but barely anybody showed up to that race, so I was kind of a shoo-in. And I was like, I've qualified 13th place according to the time of U.S. Nationals. I was like, the big race is in Angel Fire, New Mexico. And I was going to drive there from Georgia, put in my leave paperwork and everything. I had my bike on the back of my little Kia. And then the commander tells First Sergeant Stewart, isn't that the sergeant that's breaking stuff mountain biking? Why is he going to New Mexico? And so right then and there, they rip up my leave paperwork literally in front of me like a dramatic movie.
Right.
And from then on, I resented him, which we're friends now.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm sorry, I was such an asshole type of thing. But after that, I was like, man, this is definitely time for me to get out. And I kept having small injuries with my clavicle to the point where it didn't heal right. Mm-hmm. And they ended up medically retiring me. They were like, do you want to medically retire? And I was like, yes, absolutely. Get me out. Even better if you get me out with a pay.
Yeah.
So, man, that was a weird experience getting out too. I want to say I was fully ETS by April, but I had enough leave saved up that I left in March. And I didn't get a coin, a plaque, or anything from anybody. I barely got something similar to that from the fake signature from Obama, right. You get when you get out.
Yeah, what do they call that thing? The fake signature writer thing.
I don't know, it's like
the auto pen.
Oh, that's auto pen, okay. And
anyway,
they gave me a U.S. Army retired bumper sticker, and I slapped it on my Kia, and I left. Went and raced more mountain bikes on the way home.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of am jealous and resentful of a lot of people I see getting out now because they're getting pictures with all their platoon and these nice plaques with fake revolvers or spurs and stuff. Right. I'm like, I didn't get shit, dude. This unit was awful.
They just waved.
Yeah, they didn't even wave. I did forget to mention the January before I got out, Sergeant Perez was coming home from leave and got into a car accident and he passed away.
Oh.
Which, I don't know how I skimmed over that, but that was I remember a first sergeant called us into formation and somebody had already told me. So I was in the back, just teared up, completely teared up. He had died in his minivan that he drove like a maniac. but that he had passed away on his way home from Christmas leave or something like that from Texas. And like one of the other staff sergeants that wasn't really in charge of me, but we knew each other with Sergeant Perez, he like pulled me aside and like was talking to me while formation was getting announced and stuff like that he had passed away. And yeah, right after that I ETS'd and came back home to Michigan. Was dating another girl at the time. She's never going to see this, so her name's Erin. I'm not going to put her last name out there, obviously. It's changed so many times now. She's seeing all these dudes. Anyway, we dated for like 8 months, moved in together, or 8 months from when I got out. We'd been dating for like a year prior to that. But we ended up splitting up because we weren't feeling it. And yeah, I moved out and moved back with my folks who were from Howell for a few months, or yeah, it was like 4 months to get back on my feet. And I super struggled getting out. Like the first couple months, I was like, oh, I'm retired now. I can go to school and just make bank, you know? And like, I think it was like less than 2 months after I got out, all I wanted to do was get back in. Yeah. Because I didn't know like what to do. Like, what do I do now? I feel like I've already done like something significant in my life. Like, do I just get old and die? Am I going to be in a car accident in a couple of years because my job's done? Like, what is it, you know? And so like I was rapid firing, applying to police departments. I had a couple ins with DPD, even the DEA, which I thought would have been cool because I would love to shoot and kill heroin dealers. I still would like to do this to this day. But they also found out that I said that on social media, so I got denied, of course.
Right. That's going to keep you from...
Yeah, stupid. But, you know, I was rapid firing any type of dangerous job that I could find.
Right.
And it wasn't because I like danger. It's like I like the grind. I like being valuable. I like knowing I can count on people and they can count on me to do stuff. And
well, it's hard in the civilian world when in the military what you do really matters. Like the fact that you were where you were at when Sergeant McCoy was injured, that mattered. What you did mattered. And I feel like when you get out and you go to some office job,
mm-hmm.
it might matter to the CEO, but in the bigger picture, it just doesn't matter. Like, this is stupid. Why does this block on this Excel spreadsheet mean so much to somebody?
Yeah.
Fucking people are dying overseas. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's hard.
Yeah. But I was trying so hard to get back on like a grind of some kind. I was jealous. Like one of my best buddies, William, I'll say his first name since he's still in. I think he's with 10th Group now, but he went the SF route and he was like, again, ripped, like in shape, incredibly intelligent. Like you could not argue with this dude. You could be like, my watch is black, and he would convince you that it's bright red and make you look stupid saying it. He's still as smart. I talk to him maybe once a year now. But I was like, what's it like? Like, should I like try to drop my paperwork and re-enlist, you know? And he's like, man, everything has changed. He's like, I wouldn't even bother. I'd stay out. And that was not okay with me. Like we went back and forth for a couple phone calls.
Right.
And I was like, I want to do something worthwhile again. But after that whole thought got nixed, and I started being more thankful for like where I was at. Maybe not what was going on at the time, but thankful I was medically retired. I think I came out rated at like 60 or no, I came out rated at 80%. And I was like, that's a lot because I had, you know, TBI, short-term memory loss, clavicle, hip. I've had knee surgeries and, you know, all that weird stuff where they go and they make little nicks and they remove stuff and then they call you good. But I was really thankful. And so I was like, I need to like chill out and do something local. My daughter's here. I don't need to go, you know,
right.
Back overseas or try to go overseas. So I got my first ever, like my first personal handgun I've ever owned. And it was the stupidest handgun. It was a Beretta PX4 Storm and 40 cal, which is like, now that I understand basic ballistics is just like an awful round, awful gun. Anyway, so I started getting more firearms training at about the time I moved back in with my folks for a few months. And then I started dating this girl that I had a crush on in high school. Mm-hmm. And I hope she never hears this, but she was pretty, she was cute, and she was a model, and she was in hustler stuff, not like strip pornographic stuff, but nudity stuff, not participating in activities, if you catch my drift, like solo stuff, what are you going to call it? Down. And so I was like, oh, this is sweet. We started dating, all this other stuff. We got engaged, blah, blah, blah. But she was a heavy drinker. Like, she's probably the most drinking person I've ever met. And she had a real problem. She also had diabetes type 2. So when her sugar would get super low, she would act like she was blackout drunk. When it got super high, she just got irritated. She got insulin, fixed it. But she was so careless and reckless, she almost died in the bed twice next to me because she would seize when her sugar got so low. Mm-hmm. And I've had to call EMTs, 911 a couple of times, and they would send the EMTs and paramedics to the house. Didn't know if she would make it type of stuff a couple of times. Like the blood sugar reader wasn't even getting a reading. It was so low. And so that's got to be below the 20s or whatever it is.
That's super low.
Yeah. And, I enjoyed my sobriety more so at that time. Like when we would go out drinking, I would have like a beer and see how she's acting. And I'd be like, I don't want to act like this, And, I found out she had been kissing dudes. Then I found out she had been kissing chicks when she's drinking with me at the bar. And then I found out she was banging local sheriff deputies and all this other stuff. And we got into it and we tried to smooth stuff out. And one day her blood sugar got really low. And she tried to leave the house in bra and panties, sober as a bird, just really bad, low sugar. And I had to call the cops. So I was like, I'm not going to jail if I restrain you.
Right.
And she sprayed me in the eye with hairspray when the cops were there. And they were like, do you want to press charges? And I was like, no. Like, I just want to probably leave, And we tried to iron stuff out. And then I want to say 2014, 2015, it was around winter time. And I was putting up that plastic stuff that they put over windows to keep the heat in more so.
Right.
And she's like, you're doing it wrong. She got low blood sugar. She started screaming at me. And then we got into like a verbal altercation. And then she spit on me and shoved me, and I shoved her back. I went to jail for that because I admitted it. Like, we got into a shoving match, and I didn't realize what I say would be used like that.
Right.
And she didn't want to press charges, but they had to take somebody away at the time.
Yeah.
And so I had to go to jail for that and spent the night. It was Sunday, so I had to spend, this was at noon, so I wasn't even seen for almost 24 hours. And, obviously we broke it off after that. We're still friends, or not really friends, but we've openly communicated after that. And then I did my probation, and luckily my probation officer at the time, Diane, I forgot her. I can't say her last name because she's a retired DEA. She found out that I was interviewing with DEA previously, law enforcement, and she's like, I know you don't do drugs because I've tested you like weekly randomly and you've never popped off or anything. I was like, I know. Like, she's like, just check in with me once a month. And, I did the probation stuff, and then I was like, I need to do something like physically active and violent that's not going to hurt anybody. So I got more into firearms training and learning all that stuff I did in the military, especially with the mount sight stuff, the CQB or CQC now, whatever you want to call it, breach and entry. Like, that was I loved doing it. Mm-hmm. And I found a group of dudes that also liked doing it. Most of them were civilians. Well, they turned out to be like a militia group, but not like a psycho group.
Right.
Just like young folks that want to learn to not depend on government. They want to shoot, do cool stuff. They also want to learn medical stuff. They want to learn radios. They want to learn farming and crop growing, like cool stuff. We'd also volunteer. We helped bring like box trucks of water up to Flint. like 40 or 50 of us carrying it up like 5 or 6 flights of stairs type of stuff. Like we were out like not trying to be psychos, but like to become that valuable person again is what I felt like we were doing.
Right. Serve people.
Yeah. And, you know, I got to do a lot of the cool training again because people had land. And we built like a 60-foot rappel tower. We built 360-degree shoot houses. I was teaching all the breach and entry stuff. And I would only teach it to certain people that were noticeably safe and able to do so. Like we would have tryouts,
right,
kind of thing. And basically it's class time, but much more strenuous. And then I want to say within a short period of time, I got contacted by the FBI. And, you know, just like a cop that is behind you, it's going to pull you over or not, you get nervous.
Oh, of course.
And so this guy's first name is Rich. He's with the FBI, and he was at an office somewhere close to me. I don't know if he's still doing stuff, so that's why I don't give out every information. But they were like, we just want to talk to local militia groups. And I was putting out cool video edits on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, of course, like guys sliding and engaging targets, like all the cool stuff. And they're like, we found your videos, you know, we want to talk to you. And I was like, okay. I was like, do I need a lawyer present? And they're like, did you do anything illegal? I'm like, no, clearly not. Like, I wouldn't tell you anyway, bud. But anyway, so they interview me, and I actually got 2 of the guys I trained in the bar restaurant that they interviewed me at in Cleary's in downtown Howell.
Uh-huh.
And I had been training these guys on, they were like my advanced friends. I was training them in stalking, counter-stalking, surveillance, counter-surveillance, mid-range shooting, definitely not long-range because I'm not cool like that, and breach and entry stuff, like all the guys that did really well. And they were literally able to take pictures of all of us while I was being interviewed so I could have that for my records. And the FBI had no idea. Mm-hmm. Like, that was pretty cool. Shortly after that, you know, I had met my now wife, Melissa, and because her and her boyfriend at the time were in the same little group. We were training and stuff like that. And I had met her then, and we didn't like hang out or do much. Like we helped with like a veteran ruck march and a couple other things like that. But I decided to start my own tactics training company called Sledgehammer Tactical. And I was like, you know what? Fuck all this. I'm going to move back to Colorado, ride mountain bikes. And my buddy was like, apply for my police department. So I did that. And they were like, yeah, we'll take you. Cool. Moved out there, and like 5 months in, they're like, you don't have any college. And I was like, well, I just started college, and you guys said you'd take military experience in lieu of lack of college.
Right.
They're like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. And so I'm like shook up trying to run my tactical company, and stuff is almost double the price as it is in Michigan and Colorado Springs. So like the apartment was expensive, and I'm like, what do I do now? So, you know, I'm running my own range. I'm training people a couple times a month, anything from EMTs to like Colorado Springs SWAT guys, and they're just volunteering, and it's not like I'm making like major bank off of it.
Right.
I'm working at like the Air Force PX, which was a mistake because I was supposed to be put on the gun counter. And they're like, well, we need help unloading gardening soil. And so I was doing that a lot. And after a month, I quit that and moved on and worked at a bike shop out there, of course. And, you know, all this time I had made a couple cool friends. Ben, I was a dental assistant.
Really?
Yeah. I worked at a pharmacy before that too, but I had all these weird jobs, right? And I ended up meeting like 2 really, really good people while I was there. Ben, who's like 15 years younger than me. He was a dental assistant too. Like this super rad Utah hippie that liked riding bikes and shooting guns. And we're still friends, obviously, to this day. But hung out with him a lot, riding bikes and shooting, and was teaching him to shoot like mid-range stuff with a bolt gun, bolt action. And then I randomly met this super tall, again, I've run into these intelligent people like once every couple of years. The super tall, intelligent guy that likes to argue, bike riding veteran. And I'm like, are we like best friends? Like, so, and he got me to where I am now, which is wild to think about. But anyway, I spent time with them out there for about a year, and he's getting me into like computer stuff, network security, cybersecurity stuff. And I'm like, I miss my friends, my daughter. I can't fly my daughter Madeline out here to Colorado because her mom doesn't like me, understandably.
Right.
And, I miss her, and I miss my family, my mom and dad, and seeing them. So I'm like, I'm going to move back to Michigan. And I took my dog and like my TV and I think a couch, and I just left because I was talking to Brady, and I think I was talking to Ben too. I was like, I'm so like upset all the time. I just miss everybody. I think I'm just going to go. And my best friend, Brandon Anderson, who I deployed with the first time, I lived with them for a couple months. Him and his now Psycho X, so I can say that. But, I talked to them multiple times over the course of hours and beers of like trying to figure life out. And I just moved back to Michigan, kept training people. Eventually got a job at a gun store. I don't want to say where it's at because it's pretty obvious, but after a few months, I started designing training requirements, classroom time, slides, whatever. And after a few months, I became the director of training, and I was able to teach almost whatever I wanted in the ranges, like anything from vehicles, close quarter combat, like how to exit a vehicle when you're in a gunfight, shooting around a vehicle. We were able to use like simunition, and so like chalk rounds. They feel a little pinch when you get hit, but we would set up like hallways in the range and stuff like that. It was, I got to shoot like probably 6,000 rounds a month almost for free. But I want to say around August of 2018. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, in August about 2018, my now wife, wonderful Melissa, messaged me on Instagram, who I'd met before training with the militia group, and she was like, do you have any brass? Because she was wanting to make jewelry with like crystals, and like brass was cool because some crystals would fit in the cement brass. And she's looking for 50 cal brass. I'm like, nobody's shooting that and leaving their brass because that's expensive. They probably reload it. It's like $7 a round. Yeah. And she's like, well, what do you have? And I gave her some options. She didn't understand the sizes, so to speak. She would if I had handed it to her, but it's hard to explain over text, Yeah. So I was like, you want to get a beer sometime? And, she's like, yeah, and just a heads up, like so-and-so, her now ex, is out of the picture. He's working on moving out. And I was like, okay, because that'd be weird if we like went and hung out and he was still in your life, because I don't like doing that.
Right.
But anyway, we hit it off like so hardcore. Like the first night on a date, we went to get pizza and a beer, and we just had a nice like romantic night. And she knows I'm hard of hearing, and it was kind of loud. And so she was sitting to the right of me, and she was like trying to talk to me in my ear. And I was like, can you speak up? And she went to go like pull my ear, and I like spun real quick and kissed her. And that was like my sneaky little I'm deaf, disabled, and cute type of kiss. And totally like snuck it in there. And like since then, we were dating for a while. Oh man. And there's a lot of weird drama, I'm sure, that she does not want out there. But her ex had said to the same FBI agents that I previously kind of worked with, that I was making machine guns, silencers, and I was going to kidnap a senator.
Oh.
And which, like, I was going to gunsmithing school previously too.
Right.
So I knew how to make the silencers. I never made one. I had no clue how to make a machine gun, but I'm sure I could figure it out. But I wasn't doing any of that. And I definitely wasn't going to kidnap anybody.
Right.
And so word got to the agents I was working with, and they're like, we know you're not doing this, but there's been a formal complaint, so we need to investigate you. And at the time, I was getting ready to do my secret clearance to go overseas, going to try to contract. And because I was being federally investigated, I can't hold the clearance ever now. I can't get a job with any police department now or anything that requires any kind of clearance, really. I'm lucky I have the job I have now. So I was like, well, that's out the window. And, you know, she feels god awful about that, but it's not like her fault, obviously. If anything, it's kind of like nobody's fault. Like the psycho ex was angry and thought like they were still together in some format, even though she was trying to evict him. And there was just a bunch of weird drama. I went through court for years. So I'd been federally investigated now at this point. And we just continued pushing on. We kept it what we call PAF, which is professional as F, because they were taking screenshots from my Facebook, all sorts of stuff of me shooting firearms because I had been around so much cool stuff.
Right.
That they were using that against me in court, saying like I'm a PTSD riddled veteran. I'm going to hurt their child because now I have a stepson, their child that they had together. And they were just trying to use all that against me and drag me through the mud, drag her name through the mud too. And there was probably 6 days a week for months, for probably over a year actually, where she would call me crying about the stuff that went on in court because it was almost weekly, and you know, communication that happens between that would get her upset.
Right.
And, you know, we just tried to keep it professional. And in the end, we obviously came out on top. And with that drama, he ended up going to prison because he put a GPS tracker on her car and hardwired it in and went across state lines. So it became a felony because she was going down to add to all the stress from the ordeal onto her. She had a really bad cancer in her back. She was constantly going down to Ohio for treatment. And so, you know, the mechanics that were looking at her Jeep found it. And she called me immediately because I was like, he was giving hints that he knew where she was. And I was like, he either has like your Gmail access or something else. And I was like, I guarantee it's a GPS. We couldn't find it before. But anyway, he went to jail or prison for that for a while. And he's been out and he's seen his son, which is cool. And it seems like he mellowed out a little bit because, I don't know, I think he just had a traumatic time with the breakup. Not saying it's justified or any excuse, but it was deeply psychotic. And I don't want to put all that information out there, but it was scary. Like one example was he showed up at my parents' house with a gun. So, like that's all documented, obviously. But
it sounds like maybe he's got it figured out now, though.
I mean, we can hope so.
Yeah,
for sure. Because like I think he had just a mental breakdown, and I think he didn't know who to talk to about it or how to deal with it. You know, and so that's probably the end of the court drama stuff. During this court drama, Brady, the guy in Colorado, the tall guy that was just super great dude, I dipped my toes into cybersecurity because previously he had hacked into my computer and changed the background and the time. I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I want to do hacking stuff.
Yeah.
Anybody that gets into computer stuff is immediately like, I want to do hacking, you know, and then they phase out and do something else. But I got into it, and I'm wrapping up my bachelor's soon, but I'd been doing like all the hacking labs from Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, like all these badass cool labs that you learn how to break into stuff. You also learn how to protect your stuff. So it's called like red team is the penetration testing or hacking team. Blue team is your defenders that work to like secure a company or an asset or whatever. There's many different things that contribute to all that, but I got into it and found myself at a job where I was monitoring for companies, like probably multiple companies a night shift, and I was investigating when alerts would pop up and seeing if they're worth calling the client over at 3 a.m. or not. And from there, it just spiraled into insane cybersecurity stuff. after the court stuff, I started working with that company's hacking team because I showed great interest in it, and I had pretty good knowledge. I wasn't like, by no means am I an expert, like
right
in any level. I was really green, and they took me on, showed me some stuff, but then they kind of stopped letting me shadow. And at the time, I had been promoted so much so quickly. I was managing, not just watching, I was managing 5 or 6 clients' networks, like their entire cybersecurity network, while I was learning all this hacking stuff. And it was hard to the point where I was having crying fit breakdowns in the office with my door closed because I couldn't handle it. And eventually I told one of the managers, I was like, I'm not going to the penetration testing team. I'm going to stick with the SOC. It's too much right now. I'm like, okay, glad to have you back. So I kept managing my clients over here. And like, to show you how big one of these clients are, one's a major gas company that operates in the U.S. that was hacked before I took over. That's how big and important these companies were. I mean, they were paying us like $170,000 a month to monitor their stuff, and I was in charge of it. But eventually some leadership guys switched over, and this guy that used to help me a lot became a total asshole. He was micromanaging what I was doing. He was saying I was not putting enough information here or there where they keep records. And I was like, but these are your tickets. Look at your notes. My notes are even more detailed than yours. And they still found a way to try to keep me on a kind of like a review plan.
Oh, like a performance improvement plan?
Yes.
A PIP.
Oh,
Very familiar with those.
I haven't heard that in forever, but it made me, like, I was having a hard time with it because I was still going to school and my clients were happy. And the people that I had one more step I needed to go to climb that ladder. It's called a SOC lead. I was a SOC 2. The SOC leads that knew way more technical stuff than I did about securing the environment, they were happy with like what I was doing. And one of the SOC leads I had passed away from cancer. She was amazing, Carlissa. And they were all happy with what I was doing. It was this one dude that made a big deal out of the smallest things. Like, none of my clients ever got breached. None of my clients ever complained, even the most difficult ones, a major medical company in the Midwest, I would say. I had some difficult clients. None of them ever complained, really. Or they did not complain. But that pushed me to the point where I started applying for other jobs. And I appreciated the salary I was on there because I was able to take an extended lunch and go play hockey and then work an extra hour or two later.
Right.
And they were cool with that, except for this one guy that had a problem with me that was in charge of stuff. And so in October, while house shopping, while on this PIP, while fixing my credit, thanks to my wife guiding me in the right path for all that, getting our lives squared away, everything. We got a house in October, and I got picked up for this new cybersecurity job, making like 40% more, 35% more than I was at the other job, with kind of more relaxed responsibility, but a little bit more technical. And there's a lot of guidance from this new company. And it was the greatest couple months of my life, dude. Everything happened at once. Like, my stepson is playing football. He's making friends because he had trouble making friends when he was younger. He was picked on. He's almost 6 foot and he's 12.
Wow.
He's
a big kid.
Yeah. And he's like the nicest kid ever. Like, he has an incredible sense of humor. Loves Pokemon. He's a nerd. But he also like played football. So he's starting to play football, make friends. They moved all the way out from St. Clair Shores to Brighton so we could all live together. And we got this house. This new job is kicked off. And, my wife's doing some technical QA stuff too. And so that's really like all this experience and hard work that I've talked about, like, came down to like a few months of just insane like bliss and like being so like thankful for like everything. Like just being like happier, even though there's so like little dumb problems. Like we're trying to fix drywall and stuff right now.
Yeah.
But like, God, we have a house, we have land that backs up to this other cool land that's not ours, but we can wander in. New job, just making bank. My rating was bumped up to like 100%. So that's like incredible. I don't know. It's just been like lots of weird experiences amounting to like 2 or 3 months of like insanely good things,
Right.
like to be thankful for, to appreciate. And after all that started happening, I started like volunteering more so than I was before, or at least donating if I couldn't volunteer.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And that's kind of where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Mikas had mentioned doing this months ago, after I think he was filmed, I was like, I don't know, man. I was like, I have so much to talk about. And like, I don't know if like he didn't know, like he's going to know now, but he didn't know like the in-depth parts of like the Sarah McCoy story and stuff like that.
Right.
And I don't think my wife knows either. But, you know, it's just been insanely good. Like, and having great friends. Like, I've got 2 or 3 really good friends, and I've got some associates, you know, and I've of course met some people that you want to break their face, you know. But like stuff like the hockey program I'm a part of with Mikas, where I met Mikas.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I could mention that.
Yeah, you can.
Michigan Warrior hockey program I found a few years ago when I was just learning how to ice skate. Like this past October, I've been ice skating for 3 years. Skated once or twice before. But like they push you, like some of these guys push you and coach you, like Mikas, Dougie, Ben, other people. They just they coach you and they give you little tips and they're encouraging. So you find like you kind of find your tribe again. There's always like 1 or 2 assholes, you know. I think
wherever you go, right? It's the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
Right. There's always gonna be that 20% that drive you nuts, and it doesn't matter where you got or where you go. But you're right. Like I think it's important especially as a veteran to find that again.
Yeah, it's hard to find.
Somehow. It is.
Because when you like get out, whether it's on good terms or not, like I heard it best from like a podcast video, like a TED Talk. This guy's like, when he was in the military, and he's like, when service members get out, they don't know who to trust, who to look for, because he would die for you, you would die for him, type of thing.
Right.
And that's just not found anywhere. And so you go you might go full circle, but you hopefully eventually find your tribe, or you enjoy your life of solitude, whatever it may be. And like, that's how I met Mikas, and Mikas is over at my house checking out the drywall. And then he's letting me use his trailer that I bent up a little bit.
That's what friends are for.
Yeah.
Right.
And like, I don't know, like they're just, a lot of them are just good people. And like, it's not easy. It's not easy to find in the slightest anywhere.
It's not. It sounds like though you've come full circle. I mean, you know, all the stuff that you've been through, all the stuff that you've done, the people that you've lost, the friends that you've made, the relationships that have come and gone, because that's how life works sometimes. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you're on that even footing now.
Yeah, I'm trying to enjoy it and just
enjoy the hell out of it.
Be thankful and like doing cool stuff. Like I volunteered for some of Mikas's events with Veterans Connected and stuff like that. Right. Haven't been able to as much recently, but just like trying to spend time volunteering. And the company I work for now, doing cybersecurity, believes very much in volunteering, which I don't know if I should say their name, but they're very pro volunteering to the point where they give you paid time off to volunteer, to do stuff, you know, and you could sneak by and do like 4 hours in like a homeless shelter and they'd write you off for 8, but they like encourage you to just be out. You don't even have to wear like the shirts that they give you. They just love being in the community. So like I went from a total opposite cybersecurity career to like this place that I understand, like I've only been there for like 4 or 5 months, but like I'm not dreading anything, you know, and I super appreciate being able to work remote and bop in the office. And like they just sponsored one of our Warriors games because I put the president of the company like on the spot. I was like, would you consider donating? Like that kind of thing in front of like 10 or 12 people.
Who's going to say no?
Yeah.
Not me.
But, I mean, they have their core values like really well established. And it's not just written in a pamphlet. It's like the fact that a company gives you time off to do that kind of stuff, and they actually contribute to like stuff you want to do. Like even my boss, who is again more technically intelligent than I am, he's like, every couple weeks we have a one-on-one, and he's like, what can I do for you? Like not in like a general sense, like write it down on paper what I can do for you, but like, how's school going? Do you want to take any additional certs, any classes? Like, do you need time off? Like that kind of stuff. Like, it's like finding all these people like at once is, God, rare.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you have to enjoy it. I mean, we know, especially you and I know that we're not guaranteed tomorrow, so we might as well enjoy what we've got going on today, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm almost 40 and trying to play ice hockey and ride mountain bikes still.
Got to do it. My son's right around the same age, and he's playing hockey and doing all kinds of fun stuff. So, well, we've been at it for almost 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
So, at this point, unless there's something else that we need to talk about, we can start wrapping up the conversation. I don't know if we've missed anything. But as we wind down, I always ask everyone the same question, and that is, years from now, when you and I aren't here, and someone's listening to this, what would you like them to take away from how you've lived your life? What message do you have for people?
This is the message for people part.
Yeah. That's the hard part.
Well, I mean, I had paragraphs for this written down, but I would say first part is to take as many pictures and videos of everything as you can. And then, let's see. Even when you're older than you think you should be, continue education in some way. College, certificates, welding classes, EMT classes, firearm classes, whatever it is, just like continue growing as a person, I would say. And along with that, I think one of the most valuable things that we have is time. So you got to donate some time to somebody that can't pay you back, I think is the most important stuff.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time out tonight to talk with me. I appreciate it, and we hope to see you again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Veterans Archives. We hope you enjoyed this veteran story. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button, like and share our videos, as well as checking us out on social media. We're on Facebook and TikTok, LinkedIn, X, and Instagram. Be sure to check out those pages, share, and like. And for more information about what we do, go to www.veteransarchives.org.